See, I had to practice. Matt, Bracken. So we got Matt Smith, Matt Bracken. I'm calling him Bracken and Matt Smith today. Matt, to keep everything less confusing. So thanks for coming on, guys.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
So why don't we were just talking about the book that you're reading right now, Matt, if you don't mind sharing that. And
Yeah, sure. It's called Seeing Like a State, and essentially what it is it just talks about the development of civilization in general, and effectively all the things that we consider civilized are actually tools of the state in order to be able to better track and monitor and really to tax or to tax people or to use them for their labor or to be able to recruit them into the military. And so it's this constant effort of quote, civilization over time to try and expand its boundaries and make everything more legible. And so we think in recent years, we've all been very worried about things like vaccine passports and central bank digital currencies, digital IDs and all that. This is it's just a trend that's been going on for a long time. I mean, the things like a fixed address is actually really new. Here in Uruguay, I don't have an address. There isn't an address. I mean, there's debate about if you give people directions here, how you tell them to get here, because there isn't an address. So civilization quite hasn't reached this part yet. But things like a last name even, believe it or not, were assigned by the state. They were not things that that we came up with ourselves. I mean, we were assigned last names or required to adopt them so we could better be tracked and measured and taxed and brought into the military.
That would be why there's so many names like Hunter, Fletcher. They were assigned by your trade.
Or Smith.
Right, Smith. Exactly.
Yeah, so I just think I like always thinking about the big picture of what's going on. And Matt, every time you speak, you always bring up these great historical anecdotes. Like your knowledge of this stuff always blows me away. I just don't have your brain to be able to maintain all those details. But I do like to be reminded of the big picture. And so reading books like that, I think, are really helpful to me. And there's something else. There's this paper I read recently. I'm shocked. This never came across my desk before. It's something that was written by a guy named John Glubb in 1976. He was born in 1896. It's a short paper, 25 pages long, and it's called Fate of Empires. And he takes this, he's a very well-educated guy, very worldly, but he takes, like I tried to read Spengler's Decline of the West. It's a bear to read this book. It's 2 volumes, it's giant. And I did read the first volume, and I'm trying to summarize, like, what is this guy actually saying? Like, how do I put it succinctly? Well, this guy Glubb does it in 25 pages. And he explains, basically, so these empires last for 250 years, and he talks, and it's remarkable the similarities that they all have. Like, did you know that feminism?
Again? What's the name of the book again?
Fate of Empires. It's just a paper. You can download it for free online. It's 25 pages long. A book is a chore for people to read. I get it, but like right. This is all it is. 25 pages. Anyway, in it, did you know that feminism was a problem in the 9th century Arab Empire? Did you know that? That all these women started taking men's roles, and there were contemporary people complaining about it at the time, and how they all became lawyers. Like, it's not new to the Western civilization where all these women are taking, like Ursula von der Leyen, are taking all these key roles. In the Roman Empire, it was the same thing. It was what is it? It's something like the world belongs to Rome, but Rome belongs to women. It was an expression, something along those lines. So these trends, these social trends, are pretty common, and he outlines these steps, these stages that empires go through, and you can see it when you look at our own.
And ours is getting pretty stale.
Pretty stale, yeah. I mean, the stages are interesting. It's see if I can recall them. It's pioneering is the first stage. So it's like it's an expansionist, youthful, sometimes conquering and bad. We would look at it, but so that's where it starts, where they're just pioneering. Then it turns into conquest. Then it turns into affluence. And the affluence is driven by trade. Now that they have control over an area, that they can now have free trade over that entire zone that is controlled. Okay, so that makes sense. And then it goes into the age of like the intelligentsia. That might not be what it's called, but it's something like that, where basically all of a sudden we decide everyone needs to be more educated. And so you see this in the UK where they had Cambridge and and Oxford, and maybe those were good enough for a long time. These really great prestigious universities, but then they said, no, we need a college in every town. We got to expand this and drive more education. And then that intelligentsia kind of leads to this era of affluence. Actually, it's affluence. I'm sorry. Then it's intelligence, and then it starts to go into decadence and then decline.
I think a lot of that I put under a blanket of what I call financialization. Well, not only me, where instead of industrial America inventing the assembly line, Model T, airplanes, everything like that, actually building the tools that went all around the world. Ships. We don't even build our own ships anymore. The Navy can't build a ship, but our money is just made with financial games.
And I think this would be a result of the age of the intelligentsia, essentially, where everything becomes an abstraction. I mean, our money is the most abstract thing I think in the world right at this point. And so, when you get in that world, you start to have, in that era, you also start to have a lot of internal fighting that occurs because internal political arguments, points where people actually hate each other, they hate themselves, or they hate their neighbor because they're another party. We see this right now, of course, but this has been going on for a long time because everyone's refining arguments and trying to improve, their position from an intellectual standpoint, and so it causes division within the community.
Well, the most wealthy counties in America right now are the ones surrounding Washington, D.C., and there's no farms and there's no factories. So it's who can get closer to the emperor, who can get the ear of a mandarin so that they can have a line put in one of these omnibus bills that benefits them specifically. And nobody reads these bills. They're 10,000 pages, and they're given a few hours to supposedly read it. And it's an up or down vote. And inside of that are all of these precisely calculated gifts, political gifts. So we're definitely in the decadence era. I mean, we can't build we were turning out ships every day during World War II, literally turning out ships a day. And the same thing with the aircraft. We had assembly lines for aircraft where like the B-17s were like several a day, like they were Model Ts. And now we build things like F-35s that cost $500 million each and can't fly. So the point of them isn't
a third of them can, Matt. Isn't a third of them can?
Yeah, depending on your definition of mission capable or mission ready, all of these things. But the point of these things is not to defend our country. The point of these things is to enrich people who are close to power. That's the entire point.
I agree, and I think that one great sign of the age of decadence is grift. There's grift everywhere in everything, whether it be, all of the NGO activity, of course, but like the homeless grift is an amazing one. I saw this. I remember it was like 8 or 9 years ago in the Wall Street Journal. They were covering this new bill that San Francisco was passing that would basically directly fund, the homeless problem, going after it directly. And that new bill would move the average amount that they were spending. This is official state spending, not even counting NGOs, to $109,000 per homeless person. And I'm like, that is insane. I mean, $109,000. American families don't make $109,000, but that's what the state is paying to fund.
And anything you subsidize, you get more of. It's like I have birds crowding at my bird feeder, so I'm going to put up another bird feeder. Guess what? You're going to be known far and wide, and the flocks are going to start arriving. And it's going to look like Alfred Hitchcock in no time. But yeah, I don't think this is going to last for too long because we're being tested. At the end of this stage in the end of empires, they start making really irrational decisions. The Ottoman Empire, I see a lot of parallels between America and the Ottoman Empire at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. If you looked at a map of the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire seemed to be controlling a huge area, Egypt, Syria, North Africa. But it was very fragile, and it was like a lake that's miles wide but an inch deep, and it can evaporate very quickly. I just heard today, this was in the context of the Pete Hegseth nomination to be DOD. We have something like 150,000 troops spread over 130 bases around the world, which means some bases we might have 5,000 and some bases we might have 100. If like the Ottoman Empire, something turns against our country and we can't just freely fly around the world, we're going to have abandoned, lost outposts. Russia had to get out of Syria quickly, and Israel just bombed Latakia and Tartus and sank all the Syrian warships that were still in port. Russia got out. I was saying,
did they leave those bases,
Tartus.
Matt? Not to interrupt you, Bracken. Did they leave those bases, or are they still?
The Russian Navy left Tartus, but the Syrian Navy. Remember, Israel is striking while they can, and while there's no real government in Syria, everybody in Syria is just waiting to see whether this turns out to be ISIS in disguise or truly moderate, unified national government in its birth. But while this is all happening, nobody is taking a Syrian gunboat out. These are Russian-made, like 150, 200-foot gunboats with big missiles on them. The ones on deck that are slanted, like the old OSA missile boats. So nobody's tending the store in terms of, say, the Syrian military. So Israel is conducting airstrikes all across Syria, taking out their aircraft, taking out arms depots, and attacking these two ports, sinking the ships in these ports. So, this is like a power vacuum. Israel's filling some of this power vacuum. Turkey is coming in a little bit more stealthily, but Turkey is coming in from the north, and America is still in the east. And I've been posting those gas pipeline maps, the notional Qatar going across Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria into Turkey. Then that would feed Europe. Already today, there's like in the Turkey Times, so it's like 2 days after Syria falls, they're talking about, is it time to build that pipeline? They're already.
We hadn't thought of it before now, but maybe it's a good idea.
Yeah, that pipeline that we have all the maps of. And you can lay a pipeline across the desert really fast. It's not like it's real difficult, where you have just flat ground. You don't have to carve through mountain ranges. You have to a little bit underwater, but mostly it's just laying it across the desert. It can go very fast. When you build railroad lines, if you've seen movies of the Old West, or a really great one is Once Upon a Time in the West, that film. But a railroad builds itself, in a sense, just the way the Suez Canal built itself. You have a barge to build the Suez Canal because it's just sand, just flat sand across Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula. A barge with a steam shovel on the front just eats the sand, puts it on the side, and the water fills in. It's the same thing with building a railroad or a pipeline. You just have a constant stream of trucks that are each carrying, 20 sections of pipeline, and that thing goes together really rapidly. It's not like the Alaska pipeline of crude oil, which requires a lot of pumping and is going up and down mountains and across, difficult terrain. You're talking about Saudi Arabia and Jordan. You're just connecting natural gas. It's not a heavy crude oil. That thing can be built in no time at all. And that's why we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline to cut off Europe from cheap Russian gas. And now they're already talking about this notional pipeline. They just had to get the Russian client out of the way. That's what this is, in a sense, this is what it's really about. I mean, there are lots of countries that have civil wars going on. Nobody's talking about, let's go to Congo and straighten out Congo, right? you know, for the good of the Congolese, we're going to send the 82nd Airborne into Congo. Nobody's talking about that. Why is Syria so important? As long as Syria was a Russian client state, that pipeline was never going to be built because Gulf gas, Qatari and Saudi gas would be competing with Russian gas for the same markets. So as long as Russia was in Syria, no pipeline. Is the 2 days after Russia's out of Syria, pipeline.
So let me ask you, both of you guys. So if they're building this pipeline, wasn't there fear that it could be sabotaged, or once it's completed, somebody could bomb it, similar to what happened at Nord Stream?
Yes, and especially using drones. But the thing about Nord Stream is it's very complex because it's undersea. You can't just send a couple scuba divers down there and patch it up, right? It's also flooded, so it's corroded from the inside out. When you lay pipeline across flat terrain, you just lay extra pipe every couple of kilometers. You just lay down, you just leave 10 extra sections. So if there's any sabotage, you just send a team out and they fix it in a day, right? Just weld in a new section, bang, you're back in business. This is why when we blew up the Nord Stream, Russia just pivoted away from Europe and towards China, because they already have, if you picture Russia as a big gas pipeline manifold, they don't have to start where the Nord Stream was heading into the Baltic. They can start at the other end of their manifold and pipeline across Mongolia to China. So they just pivoted, and they're now sending the natural gas to China. So instead of Volkswagen working, they're closing down their plant. The big
3 of them. They're shutting down 3 of their Volkswagen plants.
Yeah, and their big fertilizer plants at BASF, they're closing that down. And these are the fertilizer plant, which requires natural gas to make the fertilizer. The plant is not something you stop and start. It's something that grew organically over most of a century. It's like an aluminum smelter. You just don't turn it on and off. The aluminum is liquid inside of an aluminum smelter. You can't just shut it down or the whole thing freezes, right? It has to, picture modern concrete construction uses pumps. It doesn't use the buckets anymore. Crane and bucket is kind of passe mostly. But if you just shut down the concrete pump, right, without purging it and cleaning it with, flowing water through it, et cetera, that concrete freezes in there. The whole thing is trash. Build a new one. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with that the biggest fertilizer plant in the world in Germany. They're closing that down. It's been running for a century. It's a continuous process. You can add to it, but you can't stop it. When you stop it, it'll kind of compress in on itself. It's like a pressurized system that's been running for decades and decades. And when you shut it down, it's problematic if it'll ever be able to start again. Biggest fertilizer plant in the world. And that's a result of the Nord Stream being shut down. So we're starving Europe. We're impoverishing Germany, and Germany's really just the head of the manifold for the natural gas to all of Europe. It wasn't just going to Germany. It's going to France, Belgium, everywhere. And we blew it up. And now Russia's taking its gas to the China market. And we're talking already, 2 days after Syria falls and Russia's kicked out, we're talking about the pipeline. So you can see what's, sure, these Syrian rebels, they're fighting for something. Mostly they're mercenaries that are being well paid. If you see how they're kitted out, they've got they're not ragtag guerrillas. These aren't the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, right? These guys have got fantastic multicam, brand new uniforms, fantastic boots, all kind of great gear, tactical radios, drones. Somebody's putting huge money into this takeover of Syria. And it wasn't done because we just love them more than the Congo, right? We don't care about who's running Syria. We want that pipeline.
What do you think? What does it do to Iran? Because didn't Iran have a pipeline that was going through there, transiting to deliver their oil to? I don't know if it was going through Turkey or what, but I mean they were.
Yeah, it was going to go. It was going to go up. It was going to go north out of Iran and then across Syria if they ever if Syria was ever stabilized. This is why the US forces have been staying in the Kurdish area in eastern Syria. So Syria is so complex, the eastern third of it is Kurdish, is really, Kurdistan. And that extends right up into Turkey. So the Turks are heavily, impacted by all this. So the Iranian pipeline route north from Iran, then across Syria, would only work if Assad totally took all control of Syria. And then he would also get the revenue from the oil wells that are in eastern Syria, where American troops are still occupying them, along with their quote unquote free Syrian army and all these other, mercenary armies we're paying for, but which are now part of the mix taking over Syria. But we're never leaving eastern Syria, so that Iranian pipeline would never work. But the pipeline that goes from Qatar up through along the side of Saudi Arabia, then across a little bit of Jordan, which is American client state, then across Syria, which is soon to become an American client state, because everybody except for the Russians would love to see that pipeline. Now the Russians are, and they were just going to block it because it competes with their natural gas. They're not in a position to block it anymore. One thing that all of the forces in Syria today have in common, now that Assad is out, they all want to see that pipeline. When a pipeline goes across your territory, you get rich. This is one of the big reasons for the Ukraine war. Ukraine is another manifold of pipelines. There's gas coming out of Ukraine, but also gas from Russia goes through Ukraine, from the Black Sea goes through Ukraine. That's what the whole Hunter Biden Burisma thing was about. Whoever controls the pipelines, even if they're just transiting your country, even if the gas is from country A, your country B, and it's going to country C, if the pipeline crosses your land, you get royalties, right? Which is millions and billions of dollars. You get sweetheart deals because they want you to be happy with this pipeline. They want you dependent on the pipeline. So you have the ability, if you're a sovereign nation, to close the pipeline, right? You could just say, send the army, blow up 10 kilometers of it. We don't want it anymore. Well, who's going to do that? Everybody's making money off the pipeline, including your country's industries and energy sector. They're going to be part of the contract for laying the pipeline across Syria will be Syria is going to get the cheapest gas ever. And people really need to keep in mind, and I use the number 5 times for natural gas to liquid natural gas. It really depends on how far the terrestrial pipeline is running compared to how far a ship has to go. But just to compare apples to apples, the Nord Stream pipeline sending Russian gas under the Baltic to Europe cost 5 times less than a shipload of LNG from Texas crossing the Atlantic and then regasifying over in Portugal or somewhere and going into the European gas network. 5 times. And where petroleum, you can fill a ship with liquid petroleum and just park it, nothing happens to petroleum, or the market can change while the ship is underway and the captain will be told, you're not going to this port, you're going to that port because of some political or market force reason. The petroleum is the same, it doesn't care, or wait a week and then go to that port. With liquid natural gas, the stuff is being lost, the percentage is lost every day. People don't understand this. While the ship is crossing the Atlantic, when it gets there, there's 10% less of it. Even though everything is sealed and tight, you just can't help it. It's pressurized liquid natural gas. It's evaporating off no matter how you try. So who in the right mind would say, hey, I'm a German business, I would like to spend 5 times more for the key ingredient, which is natural gas. I mean, we're just making a profit here at BASF. I tell you what, let's spend 5 times more for Texas natural gas brought in by a ship. I mean, this is like such a backstab on our own allies. But long picture, the biggest gas fields in the world right now, these Qatari and Gulf gas fields, they just haven't had a market for it. You know, you've seen these pictures of the oil wells out in the desert where they're just burning the stuff off. You know, they just got them lit because there's nowhere to send it.
They have to flare it.
Flaring it. There are not enough natural gas tankers and liquefaction plants to turn that into a market to send it around the world at 5 times the cost of pipeline gas. But when you get a pipeline going, and unlike a liquid petroleum pipeline, which is obviously it's very dense, it needs a lot of pumping, it's a big effort. Natural gas in a pipeline will flow for thousands of miles because it's just gas. That's why it can go all the way from Russia to China now. So yeah, this is the big picture. This is like the big macro energy power struggle that's going on, even to the level where we'll backstab our own allies in Europe.
So let me ask you guys this, because two things. How long would it take to complete this pipeline from start to finish, roughly?
A couple of years at the most.
So are they starting it already, or are they waiting for this?
No, but the companies that build these pipes can just get an order and start ramping up production, and ships start bringing in kilometers worth of pipe every day. And you have teams. It's like when you watch the railroad being built or the Suez Canal being built, the railroad builds itself. It's laying track in the front of the railroad. The locomotive doesn't have to be in the front. The locomotive can be in the back, right? Pushing. So the train goes up to the newest point where the rail is laid, and all of the equipment is there. Rails, ties, workers. Today it's not manual with guys swinging sledgehammers. It's automated, right? It's a machine that's just laying rail. They lay all the rail that's on that train. It backs off on the siding. The next one comes out. It's the same thing with a modern pipeline. You've got these gigantic trucks that are have to be put together on site. They're too big for roads, and they're just laying pipe like you can't even imagine. I mean, they can bore tunnels now. They've got specific machines now to go right through rock to build a tunnel through a mountain, right? It's eating the rock. It's laying cement around it. All a machine, just continuously moving. Compared to building a tunnel or a canal, laying pipeline across the desert is like nothing. It's like taking a bunch of straws and laying them across the table. How fast could you do that? Pretty fast. So it won't take long at all. And you don't just build it. And here's the other thing. You don't just build it, start in Qatar and work your way across. You have all these different companies building their own 200-kilometer section, and they've got penalties and rewards built in for completion on time. So it's not like you're just starting here and like, how far has it gotten? Has it gotten to Syria yet? No, you start building it everywhere at once. So yeah, this is going to happen very fast, but Syria has to be pacified, meaning under one government. And they don't care if the Christians are exterminated. They don't care if the Alawites are exterminated. All they care about is whoever's running Syria is going to allow that pipeline across. And if there's one thing that the Kurds and the Turks and everybody else can agree on, it's they'd like to have a pipeline because all the chieftains get a cut. Everybody gets a cut. Everybody wants to protect that pipeline because it's basically putting money in their bank account every week that the gas is flowing. So yeah, you can sabotage it. You can send drones out, and land on it and put holes in it, but they can repair it very quickly. They'll have their own drones and planes flying up and down that pipeline. And this is a nice thing about the desert, say compared to a pipeline in the jungle in Nicaragua, and we were sabotaging those pipelines during the Contra Wars, but it's in the jungle. Guerrillas can sneak right up to the pipeline. In fact, they actually did a sabotage method in Nicaragua where they just handed hacksaws to guerrillas. Hacksaws.
Dangerous.
They found out that it was easier to fix like a blown up section, like we're going to send a commando team in and blow up a section. It's easier to just weld in a new section. You see the big hole, weld in a new section. If you have hundreds of villagers and you're just told, go out and saw slits into this thing. So it's like turning it into a sieve and you don't know where all these leaks are. It's hard to even locate the leaks. It's not like
there's no sparks.
Yeah. It's death of a thousand cuts. Instead of a big explosion and then a hole, just go out. But in the desert, you can just have airplanes flying up and down that thing. And you say, hello, nomads. This is a no-go zone. Anybody approaches within a kilometer of this thing, a gunship is going to shoot you without a question.
I was just looking in the Turk Stream pipeline. They were putting, that was in 2018, was completed. and that they were laying 4 miles a day of pipeline for that project in 2018. Just to give you a
Right.
sense of the pace.
Right. And if you have 20 companies bidding on their own sections, you give them, rewards and punishments for early completion. And if one company is working faster than another company more efficiently, then you extend their range into the slower company. You just say, now you're going to get 120 kilometers. The other company, you're going to be off the job at 80. So it's all about speed, because we're talking about such a vast amount of money that you can't even imagine. The energy is the precursor of everything else. Battleships and aircraft carriers don't run. Well, a nuclear aircraft carrier does, but to build the nuclear aircraft carrier, all of the airplanes on it, fuel, right? Energy, everything is energy. Biggest industries in Germany shutting down because of energy. So before anything else, before, religious feuds or ethnic feuds, over top of it all is money and energy. And if you even go back to the very beginning of the 20th century, when people were just starting to figure out how important oil was going to be. I mean, in a generation, we went from hunting whales to light lamps to inventing kerosene, and then white gas, which was a byproduct of making kerosene, which people figured out, which later was called gasoline. The white gas byproduct was like super high octane that you could run amazing engines off of it. This all happened in one generation. And even at the beginning of the 20th century, we've seen great movies like There Will Be Blood, with what's the actor?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
The California the gas and oil wars in California. Well, the British were doing that in the Middle East. So when you watch Lawrence of Arabia in this context, it's like, oh, Lawrence, he's this great guy. He was trying to help the Arabs, fight the Ottomans who were aligned with the Germans. So they're obviously the bad guys. The Ottoman Turks, they're like with Germany. So they're the bad guys, and the good British and Egypt are going to try to help the nice Arabs. We put the Wahhabi Saud, the House of Saud, we put that in charge of that whole area. These were the most radical, fanatical Muslims. We installed them in Saudi Arabia. When people talk about, the CIA created ISIS, the British military and intelligence created the Wahhabi faction. They were nothing. They could have been just wandering in the desert forever. We put the radical Wahhabis, the Osama bin Laden family, all of that traces back to the British. All of these, and this is not only in the Middle East, but Africa as well. These countries are artificial. At the end of World War I, France, Britain, they sat down and they decided, how are we going to carve up the remains of the Ottoman Empire? France, you'll get Syria and Lebanon. You'll be assigned the Saudi Arabia, Jordan, that'll go to you. The Israelis are coming back into Palestine at some rate, and something will have to be done with that. But these aren't natural entities. There'd be a Kurdistan if there was.
Right. This is part of the reason why there's such a problem in Syria. It's not a natural country. Syria was a territory historically. And by being encapsulated in these specific national borders where you have these different tribes, people that really have no other affinity to each other. They have no reason to be associated with each other. It's a naturally fragile state.
Well, and it's even worse than fragile, because under colonial rule, and you see this in Africa, like classically in Rwanda, but in many other countries, in Nigeria, there's typically a more go-getter westernized minority that will be co-opted by the colonial bosses, because the British don't want to be going out into the jungle and collecting taxes from every village, right? So the British co-opt the Tutsis in Rwanda instead of the more popular the majority Hutus. So you wind up with a capo class, which were the Tutsis in Rwanda or the Alawites in Syria, ruling under their colonial bosses, the French, in Rwanda and in Syria. Well, when the colonial era ends, you've got this legacy of minority rule. And obviously that's going to lead to great aggravation. Syria is 70% Sunni, but it was ruled by the Christians, Alawites, and secular, non-religious Sunnis. Well, the religious Sunnis have had enough of it. And that's what this is about. That's why they're now hanging people, beheading people. During the invasion phase, they were saying, oh, we're very moderate. Let's do a CNN interview.
The guy who's got a $10 million bounty on his head for terrorism. Saying
right.
This,
He's a Baghdadi lieutenant. He's ISIS. They've just rebranded ISIS. So it goes to show the morality of it is nothing. We don't care if the Christians are exterminated as long as there's a friendly government that gives us permission to drive that pipeline across eastern Syria into Turkey. And if the Turks have to exterminate the Kurds or co-opt the Kurds, but remember what I said, everybody loves a pipeline because it's like money in your bank account every day. I knew somebody in South Texas whose family had oil rights, and it was just like in the very southern corner of Texas when Exxon quit pumping oil out of there, when it was no longer artesian oil or gas that just came out of the ground under the pressure. He bought all these all the mineral rights for thousands and thousands of acres, realizing that once the price of petroleum gets to a certain level, there are techniques to pump water in and so forth. Well, this family, their income was just royalties. They just got checks. If your family you're the Bedouin who your tribe owns this part of the desert and they're going to put a pipeline across it, you're going to be driving a Lamborghini. You're going to have a private jet. Who doesn't want that? I mean, and you're going to protect that pipeline because that pipeline is like continuous wealth. Everybody makes money from Qatar to Turkey to the end users in Europe. So this is what it's really about.
So with that being said, I was listening to Paul Craig Roberts yesterday. Ironically, he's coming back on tomorrow. He was talking about how now with this fallout, Iran and Saudi Arabia are going to have to go back to the petrodollar, remove themselves from the idea of BRICS and go back to the petrodollar in order to have protection from the United States for a potential, advancement on Israel's standpoint. What are your thoughts on that? Because Iran is they're alone now, right?
Yeah, Iran is a big loser in this, and Russia. But Russia has too many irons in the fire in Ukraine to worry about Syria. Losing Syria for Russia means they're going to probably lose in Africa, but that's not their main. Embarrassing us in Niger and Chad and Mali. That's not a big deal to Russia compared to what's going on in Ukraine. So Russia can tolerate being booted out of Syria after 60 years. But for Iran, it's the end of the regime probably, because the Iranians, as long as Assad was in power, Iran could truck anything from Iran straight to Lebanon with virtually no customs looking into the back of the truck. And they could also overfly transport planes full of anybody, troops, agents, anything. And they could just drive a Mercedes across. There's a term that they use in the Middle East called the suitcase handshake, which is, $500,000 in $100 bills or euros that you just meet for lunch and give the guy his monthly suitcase. And Iran could do that. Just, who's funding all of these factions? A lot of it, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, they're just getting cash infusions from Iran. Now Iran's got to get on a scheduled airplane, fly to other countries. They can't just land, and they won't be just direct flight from Tehran to Lebanon. That's probably not going to be happening anymore. No. So it's going to be very difficult for Iran. Hezbollah is done. If you wind this back to October 7th, some people consider October 7th to have been what is now called a green flag operation, where your intel sources, something's up with October 7th and you let it happen, like letting Pearl Harbor happen, right? Or sending the Lusitania straight into Submarine Alley under Ireland. You're doing it for a purpose that, it's like an initiation of an explosive train. First you light the fuse, then the fuse gets to the blasting cap, and the blasting cap gets to the booster charge, etc. Everything following October 7th, long picture, Hezbollah's done now. Iran's connection to Lebanon is done. Iran is now locked out, can't cross Iraq into Syria at all. The Syrian army troops have been trying to flee into Iraq, and it's a question what's going to happen with them. Because Iran is a huge loser out of this. Their power in the area, and if this gas pipeline goes through, it'll help sustain the dollar for a longer period. It's not like there's a BRICS currency about to happen. They're not going to print a new euro called the BRIC, right? It's not going to happen. BRICS is more about making deals to trade commodities and doing contracts just in commodities, essentially, my understanding of it. So it's
an economic union. It's an economic union. The idea of having their own currency is something that, people have talked about, but it's never even been the thing that they have led with, right. They actually just want to trade more in their own currencies to settle between each other.
Right.
And so their mechanism for that is there. And I don't think there's anything that can be done at this stage to make countries not seek an alternative to the dollar. The dollar being weaponized is you can't have a global reserve currency that's weaponized. It just doesn't work. So, everybody's going to at least hedge their bet. And this is why you see countries really buying more gold.
Right.
Central bank gold buying is crazy because they need something that they could trade. This is what historically was done, is that countries they would essentially keep a ledger of the capital inflows and capital outflows of trade with the various countries, and then they would settle up in gold on some predetermined mechanism. And some combination of that with crypto, not Bitcoin, and but some sort of crypto ledger to keep track of things I think it's inevitable. That'll be the future with the BRICS countries. So I don't think it's going to drive people back to the petrodollar. The petrodollar is gone, as far as I'm concerned. I think we've abandoned that mechanism. It seems to me, where especially, as energy production has become more distributed around the world, it's what you find is that there are these huge gas fields everywhere. You have Venezuela, obviously has these huge reserves. You find out Argentina, they know some is there, but it turns out it's way more than anyone thought, the shale. And, if you can, as things become more efficient and with liquefying it and transporting it, energy production is becoming more and more decentralized. And so that hurts the whole petrodollar system, where we force the Saudis, essentially. We have a deal with the Saudis, which was between the US and Russia and Saudi Arabia were basically producing all the oil at that time. And so if the US and Saudi Arabia agreed essentially to a deal that they were going to buy our bonds, with the proceeds of the oil they sold, then it stays in place. But there's so many big energy producers now, and it's becoming way more decentralized. All the investment that's happening in China and now starting to happen in the U.S. with these small modular reactors.
Sure.
It's actually, energy consumption is going to be decentralized. So there's no way that it's going to happen now, and it's going to be driven for all the wrong reasons. It's going to be driven to basically provide massive amounts of energy to data centers. That's what it's. If you notice, there's been a real political switch, and the winds against nuclear power have changed dramatically, and it's not just Trump bringing that in. Trump's kind of iffy on it, actually, but the tides changed because all the tech guys realized the problem here is we don't have enough energy. We need way more energy.
For the data centers. I saw a video with the map of the data centers, and there's a 3D map, global map, so it's showing 3- and 4-story buildings around the big capitals. Then there's a 50-story building around Washington D.C., which is shocking. That's the CIA and NSA crunching everybody's business, right? But the data centers are now using as much energy as cities and industries. That's
and the demand curve for it is so dramatic. It's the demand is off the charts the expectations of energy consumption. And so so there's been a switch where the powers that be, you know, the people with economic interests, I would say, in it, have realized, no, this is going to be the bottleneck, energy. So we must innovate around energy. And so there's been a big push into SMRs, also with opening up. I mean, I think Trump's drill baby drill, it really, I know he's always had that idea, but I think there's gonna be a new wave of energy production happening in the US, natural gas and oil of, you know, everywhere. And it's going to be, though, not to benefit the standard of living of the people of the world or of the United States for that matter. I think it's going to be for these data centers. That's where the demand growth is.
Well, and while it's distributed, when these gas and oil fields are found far afield, it can definitely benefit the local countries. I mean, if you can make your own gas field and manifold it into your own economy, that's huge. Like there's big gas and oil discoveries between Morocco and the Canaries.
Yeah.
You know, right there in the middle. So, you know, Morocco and Spain have, the Canaries are Spain, so they have something to discuss. You know, Morocco has the world's biggest phosphate. I mean, Morocco has like these open mines where they have these, like, you know, kilometers and kilometers long, like a ski lift train bucket coming from the desert, just going to these huge artificially created seaports, just loading Chinese ship and other ships with phosphates. And so, I mean, that's like local to Morocco going to the world. And there's oil fields between Morocco and Spain, and nowhere is there a Saudi or an American in this deal. You know, this is something Morocco and Spain can work out for their mutual benefit. I mean, they have things that each need. And if you can do this without these, I'm just philosophically, I'm against the idea of this Qatar to Europe pipeline, which is just the oligarchs screwing everybody and paying off the chieftains along the way, but setting the price for gas in Europe after we blew up the Nord Stream. I'd much rather see, you know, countries finding their own. I'm not so crazy about the idea of the small nuclear reactors, but modular reactors, but they may be coming no matter what. I like the world map where you can see if there's like all the nuclear reactors in the northern hemisphere, if they all went Fukushima and Chernobyl, let's say during a cyber war, and the electrical grids all go down. It's a big question what happens to these reactors, because without backup power for their cooling ponds and so forth, they have just a few days of backup diesel generator power. Then their cooling ponds start to melt down, their cooling rods. It's all in the northern hemisphere. There's almost nothing in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
So the same thing if there's a nuclear war. It's almost all going to be in the northern hemisphere.
Matt, that's why I'm here.
I'm telling you. You just look at that, and it's like there's this thing called the ITCZ. I mean, how many people know what the ITCZ? It's the Intratropical Convergence Zone. There's not much exchange between the northern and southern hemispheres. When you look at the currents, air, wind, and sea currents, there's not a lot of exchange. It's like two different systems separated by the Intratropical Convergence Zone. That's why ships in the sailing days, they would just be in the doldrums. They could just be stuck there. You know, that there was no wind maybe for weeks. You had to wait for some random system that pushed a little bit in from the north or the south. But if there's a total nuclear holocaust, you're going to want to be in New Zealand or South America. You're not going to want to be in Pittsburgh or Moscow at all, or Beijing.
Is your concern, though, both of you guys, in terms of what's occurred in the Middle East and Russia now getting out and focusing back on Ukraine, where's your level in terms of somebody crossing that red line?
Russia's just grinding it out. They don't want to cross any red lines. They just want to slowly grind it out, and I think that they'll probably make a deal that they're going to reach the Dnieper River. Odessa is on the other side of the Dnieper River, which they consider Russian. And during the Maidan coup, when the trade union building was burned and people were burned alive in that building, this really became an emotional flashpoint for Russians. So taking Odessa emotionally, it means a lot to Russia. It was founded by Catherine the Great. It's considered a completely Russian city, but it's on the other side of the Dnieper. I don't think that Trump coming in, the idea that Trump's going to come in and make a few phone calls and this war is going to be shut down is ridiculous.
Oh, not to interrupt you, Matt. So it's interesting how you hear people, the casual people, think that Trump's going to come in like buying a car, and he's going to negotiate this, and Putin's going to take a bad deal, and that's it.
It's ridiculous. Putin's not going to take a bad deal at all. And Jacob Dreisen, you had him on the other day. Now he might rub some people wrong. People he thinks are fools, he calls them fools. Okay, so he's definitely not everybody's cup of tea, but he is a very, very smart guy. And that part of your podcast where he's talking about Trump making a deal with Putin, why would he do that? Russia has been burned. Russia is like the Indian tribes that have made like 3 treaties with the U.S. cavalry and government. And every time they come back in and kick us off the reservation, send us to another state, the Russians don't believe anything we say now. They go all the way back. They can quote chapter and verse and dates to James Baker, not 1 inch east. If they give up East Germany, NATO will not move 1 inch to the east. Now we've got the biggest NATO base in the world being built in Romania on the Black Sea. We're doing a Maidan coup in Georgia on the other side of the Black Sea. From Russia's perspective, we're just completely, marching right up to their border. But Ukraine, which was never a country ever in history, depending on how you define like a 1 or 2 year period around World War I, there was never a country of Ukraine. It was always a region. It literally means the borderland or the frontier land. Ukrainians speak a dialect of Russian. So the idea of NATO moving right into Ukraine is, the Russians have been telling us for years and years, that's a red line. That would be like China's moving into Mexico, going to put tanks and missiles on the Rio Grande. We would never, ever allow it. So imagine China took over Peru, then Ecuador, then Colombia, then Panama. They're putting missile bases in each country. They're in Honduras. Now they're doing a coup in Mexico, and they're saying we're having a referendum in California, and the Californians want to rejoin Mexico. And as soon as this happens, we're going to take over California and make it part of Greater Mexico, and we're going to put missiles and tanks in California. Can you imagine? That is exactly how the Russians look at this situation. And the neocons, it worked. The neocons, all the war hawks, the military-industrial war hawks love it. The neocons love it. A lot of the neocons, and Michael Yon calls this Jurassic Trailer Park. This is a feud, an Eastern European feud that goes back way before communism. We're talking hundreds of years ago. So many of the people that are the neocons, Kagan was Kaganovich, Victoria Nuland, I think it was like Noodleman. Their families were having a problem with the Russian Orthodox in Russia, Ukraine, Eastern Europe for hundreds of years. They brought that blood feud to America. People have to understand, it doesn't matter if Moscow is communist or Orthodox. In fact, these are progressive lefties. So they actually liked Russia better when it was communist. They liked it a lot better. Now that it's thrown off communism and it's experiencing an Orthodox Christian revival, no LGBTQ in schools, no trans rights, no propaganda for trans anything. Now they hate it. They hate it with a passion. But their chapter is closing. Got a month and a half until Trump is inaugurated. Not saying Trump is going to change gears entirely because it's so deep, but they're doing everything they can to set the world on fire in the last 2 months so that Trump can't do anything but continue the battles that are in progress. And that's why.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I was just, don't you think that what happened in Syria substantially does change the game somewhat, though, doesn't it? Doesn't it alter the dynamics? 'Cause I was worried that what was going to happen is that they were just going to continue to escalate direct attacks on Russia, trying to bait Russia into doing something stupid. And this was a lateral move instead, something totally different and unexpected, and actually done in a way that is really defies belief that it even occurred as quickly as it did, as effectively as it
Yeah,
did.
I think they moved their plans up faster because of the possibility that Trump totally shakes up the State Department. And people think the CIA is all powerful, but believe it or not, the pencil neck geek nerds at the State Department are the ones that give the CIA their orders. At the embassy, they call it the embassy team, but the State Department is over the CIA. The CIA collects information and does the covert missions, but they're under the instructions of the State Department. If the State Department is cleaned out and changes direction, this is a big risk to the neocon project. They want NATO in Ukraine right up. In fact, going to an even bigger picture, this is the maritime strategy of Britain and America, distilled by Admiral Mahan, like in the 1920s. Choke points. This is the dispersed West. In 1984 terms, this would be Oceania, right? Oceania. That's Britain, Australia, America. Our power comes from our maritime force projection. Control choke points, control transportation routes. And whatever you do, don't let Germany and Russia and China form an alliance. There's the British guy, what's his name? I'm having a mental block, but in the early 1900s, the British historian was writing about the world island.
Is that McEwen?
No, it's another Mick. Another Macomber? Mackinder. That's right. So if from Germany to China ever formed an economic bloc, it's over for the West, because our Navy won't mean crap. Our Navy will be like a Chihuahua trying to, nip at a pit bull, because they'll have internal line of communication from the German factories to the Chinese factories, Russian gas, oil, timber, minerals. That would overpower everybody else. If you look at the game of Risk, if you've got like 5 or 6 players in the game of Risk, which I haven't played since like college, but I remember it very well, that with actual pieces on a board. If there's 5 or 6 players and you manage to put your pieces on, like, say, North America, you can hold off the whole world and gain power pretty well, maybe take over South America, while all the other 4 or 5 players are slaughtering each other in Eurasia and Africa. But if somebody, and then eventually maybe they're so weakened that you can move out of North America and win the game. But if somebody takes over Eurasia completely, they can just crush North America. So the game of Risk is really like Mackinder's theory, played on a board game. Right now, by cutting off Germany from the Russian gas, short term, okay, all right, we've stopped Germany from having Russian gas. But Russia pivoted, and now they're sending the gas to China. And remember, roughly 5 times cheaper than LNG gas by ship. That's big. That's huge. If energy is like one of your biggest components in production, then that's huge. Well, we're now seeing this playing out. So this is, if you look at the world board game like this right now, I see this as like in World War II terms, but not kinetic. Okay, the Pearl Harbor isn't bombers. We're seeing Pearl Harbors, but they're not kinetic. They're financial. They're geographical. What happened in Syria is pretty kinetic when you have like a port being bombed and the Syrian Navy sunk, but the Russian Navy got out. So it wasn't exactly like a Pearl Harbor. The Russian Navy left first. They didn't want to see if Israel would, or there probably was a deal made. The Russians, the Turks, Russians, Americans, Israelis probably all said, we're leaving. So, because as long as the Russian Navy was there, Israel would have a big problem with bombing those ports. but the Russian Navy's not there. So I look at it in World War II terms. Pearl Harbor happens. Next day, Philippines fall. Singapore falls. The British outpost Singapore falls. Their battleships leave. They get sunk by Japanese land-based twin-engine bombers. This is all happening like the week after Pearl Harbor. The whole battleship paradigm, it's sunk right there. Did that mean World War II ended and Japan won? That was really a bad year after that, right? I mean, we're Guadalcanal, we're getting pushed back. So Russia right now, this is like analogous to Singapore falling for Russia. Mm-hmm. That means everything downstream to Libya, to Chad, Mali, Niger, that's now at risk of being cut off, like the branch is cut off. Does that mean Russia has now lost the war and we're just going to now win? And no, they're just consolidating their forces on Ukraine. They didn't have excess forces to defend Syria, make the Syrian army fight or replace it with like Wagner, and then occupy it. They just said, no, we can't do it. So we're going to amputate Syria, let it go, which means Libya, Africa, we're letting that go for now because Ukraine is the primary battle. So we're in a continuation phase where each side might have big wins and losses. It may for 5 years look like, oh, wow, that gas pipeline, now America's dominant again. Look, the dollar is better. We've got strong alliances with the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, everybody's loving it. But that's not the end of history either. But in the biggest macro terms, this is the maritime world, the West, the Five Eyes, Britain, Australia, competing with the Eurasian landmass, which is Germany's like the uncle we just sacrificed, Russia and China now together, and Iran. So even though Iran looks weak in terms of Hezbollah and Lebanon, Russia is building something very important that not 1 in 10,000 Americans has ever heard of, the North-South International Trade Corridor. The shipping modalities have been revolutionized so much in the last 10, 20 years. The Chinese have built ports on each side of the Panama Canal for ships that are too big to even go through the new canal. They can unload ships so fast, containers, put them on a train that's basically a conveyor belt across Panama, and load them onto another ship. And it's still much faster than going around South America. So the Iranians and the Russians have used that technology to send cargo from Russia to the Caspian Sea, which there'll never be a NATO ship on the Caspian. It's landlocked. It's between the stands, like Azerbaijan, Russia from the north, Iran to the south. So it'll go to the Caspian, transfer to a ship, straight across the Caspian, back to a railroad car. So it'll be rail, ship, rail from Moscow to India, because it'll be then a ship from Iran. So to get a cargo from Moscow to India will take a third of the time of putting it on a ship in St. Petersburg, sending it all the way around out the Baltic, which is NATO, past the British Isles, which is NATO, through the Med, which is NATO, which Suez. Means that at any point the cargo could be interdicted in a war scenario. It just, forget that route. That's going to be gone. It's going to go straight from Russia to Iran to the world, and we can't stop that because it's all interior lines of communication, including the Caspian, which is a Russian lake, a Russian-Iranian lake. So things are happening where this world island, the Eurasian super economy, is going to be getting cargo out through Iran. So Russia is not giving up on Iran. It's just that the Iranian project in Lebanon is pretty much over now.
Well, it's clear the Iranians also have chosen, that patience is the better part of valor for in responding
Absolutely.
to Israel. Like they've made a conscious choice, and that's probably affected what
Persians are not like Americans that think Persians and Saudis are like all the same, Persians invented chess, right? In our mythology, it's the Spartans versus the Persians, Thermopylae, etc. But you got to give them their due. They invented chess. They don't need to send their kids to Germany to learn to be engineers. They have their own engineering schools. They have a very excellent rocket program. Drones, rockets. They are not stupid. I think that if they don't already have nuclear weapons, they can probably put them together very rapidly. Yeah. They just don't want to do a test and make that announcement, but I think that they could do it. So yeah, the Persians are very patient. They're playing the long game. They look at this world map thing and they just see the big long picture. Forget temporary setbacks. Syria, it's bad for Russia, bad for Iran. The long-term picture is that Eurasian super economic zone is going to be dominating the board, and meanwhile in the West, we have all of these social problems that are like a festering cancer inside of our body. I mean, they look at our cities and they say, who wants to be like America?
Yeah, they just got to wait us out because the economic problems will come home to roost. They're unavoidable. There's a lot of things that the U.S. can adapt to, but
Matt, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Matt, I'm having No, Brad. It's Matt Smith.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure, but the economic realities are unavoidable. It's like trying to avoid gravity. Like there are consequences from the debt that we have, our budgets, and Elon Musk can't solve it. It cuts a bunch of they want to cut a bunch of stuff, but only what is it? Is it 10% of the budget is federal employees? So like if you fired 100,000, a million, it literally is going to make no difference in the budget.
Right. Yeah, just look at the debt curve and you can't help but think of like Weimar Germany and other classic examples. When you see the parabola going vertical, it's like, Niagara Falls is ahead. I mean,
right.
It's like saying we're just going to jump out of the airplane and invent the parachute on the way down. No, you're not.
Exactly, and it's the Thucydides trap, right? It basically declining power. So for the U.S., it's in the U.S.'s best interest to get a military engagement with its foes sooner rather than later. For the rising power, it's better to delay it as long as possible. And I think that's why you see all kinds of action happening, but so little of it's actually kinetic.
But the rising power can be patient. They've got the natural resources, a much more cohesive societies, or especially Russia. Not sure about China, but China has great social controls, top-down social controls. They can keep a lid on things for a long time in China with their social credit score and so forth. But for the West, this is when really terrible decisions are made. The declining power is also has a syphilis in the brain, and starts lashing out and doing things that are really don't make logical sense, like tempting Russia with missiles fired. American and British crews in Ukraine. The only Ukrainian in that rocket van is the guy that pushes the button when he's told. Right? That's the only Ukrainian, if that. Everybody else in that rocket van is an American or a Brit. Everybody. And the Russians know this. So this is the stage in the decline of an empire when really bad decisions are made. And fortunately, on the other side, we have a guy in Putin that understands this. He knows what's happening. Unless it was like an existential strike, like, mass cruise missiles heading to Moscow, he knows what the game is. So he's not going to go for it. But in this kind of a context, a lot of mistakes can be made. I wouldn't be surprised to see, I thought that the Russians wouldn't leave I thought they would hold on to the bases in Latakia and Tartus, that 50-mile stretch of Syrian coast. It's such prime real estate. But it's sort of like, doing a sacrifice in chess. He's just decided, no, that's not worth it, because we don't want this to go to kinetic right now. Because if the Russians, they lose a capital warship, because somebody makes a lucky, the IDF misacquires a target. I mean, hello, USS Liberty, right? It's not like these things don't happen. If the Iranian or the IDF missile locks on a Russian ship instead of a Syrian ship, then Russia is going to feel like we have, the Russian admirals will revolt if they don't, if they have sink a Russian warship. Now it's happened in the Black Sea, but that's like in a backyard context with the Russian Moskva being sunk, semi-obsolete cruiser. But if this happens like in the middle of the Mediterranean, and it's got NATO fingerprints on it, it's going to be very hard for Putin to deny his admirals a revenge strike, and then things can get out of control very easily. So I think that's why they pulled their forces out rather than risk a direct conflict. And looking at what Lavrov, even like 4 or 5 days ago when he was in Doha, Dubai, or Qatar rather, he sounded surprised by these developments, because mostly it looked like this is being arranged. Like at the diplomatic level, people are saying, look, this is what's going to happen. We're going to do this. You're going to do that. But now Israel's
people like throwing off their uniforms in an orderly way, it seemed like, and
right, getting orders not to fight back.
Yeah, it seems.
But the Israelis now going after like every, all means of Syrian power projection, down to like helicopters, Syrian helicopters. They're defanging the potential for Syria to attack Israel in any meaning or defend itself from Israel. At the level that the conquest took place, which is also very fascinating. I'm going to do a Substack about this. These probes, these armed reconnaissance probes, were basically by motorcycles backed up by pickup trucks. It's like, well, that sounds ridiculous. I mean, we've got like, tanks and gunships. Well, you can send so many motorcycle patrols out just backed by pickup trucks with extra fuel for the motorcycles. They were doing probes over the last couple of weeks, and they were reporting back no resistance. There's no Syrian checkpoints. The Syrian army is nowhere to be found. They're not stopping us anywhere. So the whole thing sped up. But when you have a military has no more helicopter gunships because the Israelis just took them out. It has no gunboats. The Israelis just took them out. The entire war at this level is going to be a few aircraft they can get together and hide, but mostly it's going to be done at the pickup truck and motorcycle level, which means it's going to be a village level conflict, which could turn into the Syrian version of Rwanda really fast. The honeymoon period of all these quote unquote moderate rebels uniting already seems to be over. There are already factions that are going to war against each other, but it's going to be it's not going to be airstrikes of Syrians versus Syrians. It's going to be, militia armies, sort of like looking like the Balkans, with militias doing ethnic cleansing.
And all that could still happen, and the pipeline still flow.
And the pipeline still flows.
Problem.
I think that depending on how much movement is restricted, there's already checkpoints where women are being told they've got to, wear the hijab. Christian women. See, in secular Syria, women could wear a hijab or not. It's up to them. But it's funny because it's the same in Morocco and lots of places. As you get closer to the coast, it becomes more liberal, because it's like a beach culture. A beach culture's got European tourists, surfers even, right? In Morocco and Syria, beach culture. So you have more Europeans. Maybe she's Muslim, maybe she's Christian, but nobody's going to ask her to cover her hair. As you get into the interior, everybody's better cover their hair. So the Christians and Alawites that don't live in the coastal provinces are probably going to try to get there. The radicals are already in Latakia and Tartus, but are they going to crack down just as much there as they do inside of Syria? I thought for a while the Russians might try to hold on to Tartus and Latakia, but they didn't. They're hanging people in Latakia. the moderate rebels are. So this could, in a month, we could be talking about a bloodbath like a Syrian Rwanda.
But
Easily.
Israel emerges as the winner in all this, then, because all their enemies are virtually. I mean,
Yeah.
what happens in Gaza now?
Oh, and Israel, if you look at the Golan Heights are Syrian territory, quote unquote, right? But Israel has occupied them for, like half a century. There's a 9,000-foot mountain, Mount Harmon, that technically is between Lebanon and Syria. But the Israelis have occupied that, and they had occupied like up to the flank of Mount Harmon. In the last couple of months, they've been encroaching over it, and reports are that they're extending into Syria towards Damascus to make a quote unquote buffer zone. So the people who see Israeli soldiers wearing the Greater Israel patch, which you don't know if that's like a joke or not. The Greater Israel patch is like there's, Sinai, Lebanon, most of Syria.
Some of Saudi Arabia.
Right. So it's sort of like nervous laughter. Are the Israelis serious about that? Or are they insane? Or is it like are they trolling us? Because that's not going over well outside of Israel. If you've seen that patch, it's like,
yeah. I know people think it's a conspiracy theory, and you're like, no, this is not. Look, like
soldiers are wearing the patch.
Articulated plan. Yeah.
Right. Soldiers wear the patch. And Netanyahu went to Mount Harmon, and said, not only are we keeping this is Israel forever. He said that in the last few days, like, this is Israel. We're planting the flag on top of Mount Harmon. And just like attacking the Syrian quote unquote Navy vessels that were remaining, and attacking all of the aircraft they can find on the ground in Syria during this null period when the Syrian forces haven't really stood up a national government. Israel's just laying waste anything it could provide any military force projection. They're also moving their line into Syria, and they're not going back.
Is it true that they used the similar pager radio type attack that was used in Lebanon?
I have only heard rumors of that. I wouldn't doubt it, but I don't think that it would have the same surprise factor. I mean, anybody in the Middle East with a pager now has like shit canned it, or is like, keeping it in the other end of their car.
Yeah.
But the tactical radios, I've seen pictures of the Syrian rebels coming in, and in their battle gear, which is all like very new and nice multicam kind of, with tactical vests with hard plates and, UHF radios and earpieces. These guys are well equipped. This is not your ragtag guerrillas. These people are networked. They brought the drone operators from Ukraine. When you talk about the volunteers in all these sides, because you have people fighting for Russia and for Ukraine from all over the world, some of them get training. They learn to be drone operators, and then they can go anywhere in the world with that skill. So one of the reasons for the fast rate of advance was the Syrian rebels came with drones. And if you're just a guy sitting at a checkpoint with a tank, and your radio may or not even work, and a drone is coming, you have absolutely no idea what to do and no defense.
Right. So and that's so advanced now compared, that's never seen that battlefield there, right? I mean, that new tech.
They never saw that on the battlefield there. And that really started with Turkey before the current Ukraine war. It was like 5-6 years ago. In the Nagorno-Karabakh enclave of Armenians in Azerbaijan, which is like disputed territory, it's claimed by Armenia and Azerbaijan. The Turks armed the Azerbaijan forces with Turkish drones, and they just laid waste to Armenians that were like Cold War era tanks, Cold War era defensive strategy, and had absolutely no defense for Turkish drones. So the Turks also are very cutting edge in drone warfare. And, so when they're surrogate forces, which, I even saw a video today of soldiers killing people in a hospital, killing wounded soldiers that were in a hospital. And allegedly, I don't speak the languages, but the soldiers that were questioning and then shooting these injured soldiers in hospital beds were speaking Turkish, not Arabic. So in that part of the world, those videos go around and it's like Turks are in Syria. This is not a native organic Syrian uprising. This is that Idlib province, which is the northern province against Turkey, part of the peace deal from 5 or more years ago was all of these ragtag rebels will just have a haven in Idlib province, because Turkey didn't want them coming in as refugees.
Right.
And the American State Department in Israel said to Assad, you can't touch them. Idlib is like a sanctuary, a no-go zone. So this was like a marshaling and recruiting and training area. And, with free reign from Turkish agents in there teaching people drone warfare, uniforms, their equipment seems to be, the armor that did come down was a lot of like American M113s that were like given to Turkey years and years ago. And other, Turkey makes their own armored vehicles. So a lot of what you did see in terms of armored vehicles were Turkish light armor. Not tanks, but the Turkish light armor, and that's probably the extent of where Turkey is going to stay. When you just see Toyota pickup trucks and motorcycles, that's taking over the rest of the country, and also from the south. So Damascus was getting it from north and south. When it appeared that the advances from the north were coming right through Aleppo, Hama, and Homs, then there was an uprising south of Damascus, and that's when it was clear that Assad was going to fall. But where you see the Turkish armored vehicles, that's probably going to be like the Turkish zone of control. Beyond that, there's still Turkish agents and Turkish money and funding, mercenaries. But yeah, the whole thing could be a shit show in a month. I mean, it could be like ISIS. I've already seen hangings and beheadings, machine gunning of POWs.
But isn't it crazy though? It seemed like, depending on who you believe, that Israel was, they weren't going to survive this, and now they're like they're the winner. They have no.
Well, one script is October 7th was a green flag that Netanyahu was already like under criminal prosecution. You can argue that it was like lawfare against him, like Trump, depending on your point of view. Netanyahu is absolutely a criminal; he deserves to go to jail. Or Netanyahu is like Trump, and lawfare was, corrupt judges were doing lawfare against Netanyahu. But the fact of the matter is, he was under extreme risk of going to jail. Okay. And that's when October 7th happens, which there are many accounts that this was well known. Everybody knew it was going to happen. The people that were warning about it were told, shut up, you're transferred, no more emails from you. They even moved that festival. That rave festival would be, devout Jews in Israel. Their least favorite people in the whole place would be a bunch of hippies that have a religion of drug taking. Okay, it's like an ecstasy rave festival where we worship the sun. If you had one group that you wouldn't mind seeing massacred, it would be them. Their festival was literally moved. Oh, you can't use that fairgrounds. No, you can't. That's had a problem with that. We're going to move you to like helicopter or parachute range of Gaza. Have your rave right there. That's the sacrificial, like that's like a lamb being staked out for a lion. So the paragliders came in and killed a bunch of these hippies and did a lot of other bad things. But if you look at it in a long context, like a 1 year context, look what has happened. Israel had October 7th that green lighted them to just lay waste to Gaza. Next chapter, going into Lebanon, fighting Hezbollah, the pager attacks,
assassinations, taking out everybody.
Assassinations, and the Hezbollah that might have gone to Syria, because remember, Hezbollah is like a mobile player on this field, just like Iranian forces are. Hezbollah, if they had been not in a current, just in a war with Israel over the last 2 months, that Hezbollah could have shored up Assad. and they're for real fighters. But they're
Right,
pinned
but the
down.
contact pulls all of them away from Syria, right?
Right.
So,
And
I mean,
now,
there's a lot of brilliance to how this was done. When you, when you
yes.
see it now, it looked like it was suicide a while ago, and now it's like, I mean, I'm kind of impressed, to be honest. I don't think it's good.
Iran is now cut off from Lebanon. Hezbollah is cut off. Gaza is cut off. And Israel has just blown up everything in Syrian territory that could ever pose a danger to Israel. And if there is a genocide of Christians and Alawites and Shia in Syria, they don't care, because the Israelis and the Sunnis, the radical Sunnis, can have like a peace where it's our side of the line, your side of the line. We're going to have strict Sunni Sharia law. So remember, Syria is 70% Sunni, and it's like 10% Alawite, and Shia like 15%. So, but they've run the country. Now it's payback time. So the Israelis don't give a damn if every Christian church in Syria 2,000 years old is leveled. They don't give a damn. That won't bother them a bit.
So now they have access to Gaza, and so all those Palestinians now, I mean, they're
toast.
Toast.
Yeah.
Iran, you think will blow up from within? There'll be some type of civil unrest revolution to get rid of that current regime?
I think that Iran, there's a lot of forces inside of Iran that want Iran to move closer to the West. They're tired of this. They're not going to be signing up in Iran to like form an new Iranian militia to go and put Assad back in power. Nothing like that's going to happen. This is done. The Assad chapter is over. Sunnis are going to rule Syria. The question is, which of these factions that are, Kurdish Free Syrian Army, quote unquote, the HTS faction, which is rebranded Al Qaeda and ISIS, are they going to find a way? Is somebody going to come out on top? Will there be a dividing line? Will the Kurds have a sector, and where will the pipeline go? Right? These are all key questions. Will the Alawites and Christians focus on the coast and try to make a stand there? It doesn't look like that's even possible. The Sunnis are going to have checkpoints everywhere, and if you're a Christian, you're going to be just dragged out of your car and shot. I mean, so you can't just freely roam around Syria now trying to get to where you feel safer. If you're a woman, you're petrified right now in Syria.
So Israel's free and clear right now. They have no viable. They destroyed every one of their threats.
They destroyed all their threats in Syria, and they're moving their quote unquote buffer zone. Remember, Golan Heights was a buffer zone 40 years ago. Now they're saying Golan Heights, that is Israel. Forget it. Period. Mark it on your map. That's now Israel. And our buffer zone is going to extend halfway to Damascus. Well, there's nobody to stop them.
Gaza, then what happens to that land? They'll take it.
It never is rebuilt.
So they'll take it though. They'll do something with it. West Bank, they'll do something with that.
Eventually, but right now it looks like Dresden. I mean, it looks like Berlin after the bombing. You can't live there.
To Matt's credit, I mean, Israel, right? They've emerged as the winner of all this, and I didn't see this coming, playing out this way.
But the war. Remember, look at World War II. Pick a date. Oh, Japan is definitely winning. Germany. Oh, look, Germany's practically to Moscow. They are definitely winning. There are many more chapters of this to unfold, and so far everybody is keeping it below Russia versus America kinetic. This World War II is being played out, but in proxies. Ukraine is a proxy, Syria is a proxy, but there's no direct Russia versus America battle. That could happen if, like, a capital ship is sunk by, something that's very vulnerable. And I've mentioned this before here and there. If you blow up an LNG tanker in the port of Boston or Houston, it's going to be like a tactical nuke going off. But depending on how you light it off, right? But if you blow up an LNG tanker right in the middle of the Atlantic, nobody's even going to know, except for some guys at the Pentagon. The 30 crew on board, their families will be sad. and the crew on board will be gone in, a blink of an eye, and the ship will be gone. But other than like a flash on a satellite, who cares if an LNG tanker is sunk? So that's like the kind of thing that you could just, oh, it must have had an accident. Was it a torpedo? I don't know, but it's like 20,000 feet. You're going to go out and check? I mean, down. So when this goes kinetic, it'll be by little stages, like these cables being cut in the Baltic from, I think, like Lithuania to Sweden, I forget.
Yeah.
But that was, a Chinese ship dragged its anchor. Whoops, sorry. And all the data goes on these fiber optic cables. And they're just laying there on in the mud. They're not dug in. They're just, and they're mapped. They're mapped so that, the ship's charts say, don't anchor here. Fiber optic cable, do not anchor here. Well, it's like not hard to go out and find it. And that's where all the data is going. Satellites don't move the data. Satellites move pictures and things like that, but the heavy data is all undersea cables. So you could just start seeing people like, oh, whoops, another cable accident. And that favors the landmass power with internal lines of communications over the sea power, where our connectivity is all cables from, every part of our empire to every other part. Maybe
that's a strategic advantage of Starlink and why it's gotten so much support.
Which is a government program, a Pentagon-paid government program,
yeah.
100%. But
but Elon's going to come in and clean all this out, right, with Dodge, and there's going to be so much.
Yeah,
it's going to be great.
There's a Musk thing today about Cape Verde. These are like super poor islands, like down below Canaries, closer to Africa. The Cape Verdes are on the internet. Like, yay! Look at Starlink. We spent $90 gazillion to build Starlink, a government Pentagon project. Thank you, Elon Musk. So that the Cape Verde island is on the internet now. Yay! You think that's what it's about? It is not.
Yeah, definitely not. It's the same notion as spreading democracy to the world, right? The idea of these satellites, that it's about connecting the world in a positive way instead of basically a Pentagon project.
And control. Before we started recording, we were talking about, at the beginning of the show, we were talking about control, data. It 1 century ago, you could be a criminal, like a hunted criminal in Europe, and get on a boat to Australia and say, make a new name, and that's it. There was no way to check back there. I like on Kindle, there's a Kindle free library. Almost everything pre-World War II is out of copyright. So there's a fantastic library. You can just download free stuff. One of the most amazing books I ever read, it's called, I'm paraphrasing, it's called like Across Asia by Bicycle. This is like in 1908 or 1905. Bicycles were already a thing. Steel tires, pumps. So two American college boys took a ship to like Istanbul with their bicycles, and nobody had ever seen bicycles everywhere they went. They went all the way across like Turkey, Russia, China, bicycling. And there was no visas involved. They would just get to a border like, hello, we're from America. And not only did they take bicycles, which nobody had ever seen, they brought revolvers with them. They brought guns with them. And everywhere they went, the customs and border people were like, well, of course you need guns. There's bandits out there. I mean, only a fool would go out there without a gun. In some places, they provided them like security, like we're going to assign some outriders with our guns because we think it's too dangerous for you. So these Americans went around the world on bicycles, or across Eurasia with bicycles. Everywhere was a sensation because nobody had ever seen a bicycle. There's no movies yet. A bicycle was like an unbelievable new invention. Americans they had never seen before, with guns and never a visa. No permission. Just show up and
there were no passports.
Come on in.
Yep.
Sign the book. Welcome to Turkey.
That's the thing is people have this notion of, we talk about freedom and being free, and freedom is super important to me. It's, but our our Overton window on freedom has been so narrowed. Really,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just, there's like the pre-World War I period, and then everything since. Because if you read anything about the freedom of movement and travel and, well, basically, I mean, everything. It just doesn't, it defies any notion of freedom that we have today. It's not the same.
Even when I was born in 1957, so I got my driver's license in like the early 70s. You could get a learner's permit in Maryland at 15, and everybody that I knew did. And the ID card for Maryland was a piece of cardboard, not laminated, that looked like a Social Security card or maybe a library card, like a cardboard library card. No picture. It had your birthday, brown hair, blue eyes, height. That was it. Like your address, that's it. And it was so easy to fake that we would actually change the date from like a 57 to a 54, like with an X-Acto knife. You'd like scratch it out a little bit, and then with a pencil write a 4 where the 7 was, and go buy beer with it. So if you took that card to Pennsylvania or to another state, they had no way to check. There was no computer system to like say, check in your database. What database? And there weren't even fax machines yet, right? When you see the old gangster movies where Bonnie and Clyde or the Dillingers, they would just get in there. They bought a Ford that was faster than the police cars, like an 8-cylinder Ford, outrun the police, cross 2 or 3 states, and then just have a party. Rent a couple rooms at a hotel, and nobody knew who you were. Now that guy, the Luigi Mangione, his pictures everywhere in the world in 12 hours.
Does that story add up to you, Matt Bracken?
Yeah, sure.
They found him in Pennsylvania. Was it a McDonald's or something?
Right. He had the above pictures with the hood weren't very clear of his eyebrows, but the picture in the taxi cab where the taxi took a straight-on picture of him, even though he had his mask on, his eyebrows are so distinctive. They're like gigantic eyebrows, like a cartoon eyebrows. And the person at McDonald's, and he was wearing a mask in McDonald's. So already this is unusual. It's like, that's a weirdo. Hey, man, anybody told you the pandemic's been over a while? You look young and healthy. Why the hell are you wearing a mask? So that gets somebody's interest. It's an anomaly. And his eyebrows are like just like unbelievable caricature eyebrows, almost a unibrow. He was recognized by his eyebrows. And that's only because the picture was everywhere. When I was a kid, this was a library card. It didn't connect to anything. It connected to nothing. Even 50 years ago, I could have gone to Australia and maybe had a felony back in America. Maybe they'd catch it, maybe they wouldn't. I could make a fake name, used to be you could get a birth certificate from like a dead kid and just start a new idea.
You could do that 20 years ago. You could do it.
Not now. Facial recognition. And
Doug tells me when he was he said he was a teenager and he was flying between Chicago and DC, and he brought his .22 rifle with him and put it in the overhead compartment on the plane.
Yeah.
So I mean, things have just changed so much.
In the 70s, you would take a gun to school to show everybody at the parking lot. I got a new gun. You'd be like, have a circle of your friends passing a gun around. I just bought this gun. You wouldn't take it into the classroom, but you had shooting ranges in high schools.
Yeah. You recommended a book. I want to recommend one to you. I think you might really enjoy. It's called Chasing the Last Laugh. It's about this crazy voyage that Mark Twain went on, Samuel Clemens, near the end of his life, because he was bankrupt, and he needed to raise money, so he went on a live spoken tour, and it's created from mostly his accounts of that trip, and the way he describes all the places. He goes all the way across the U.S. and then he goes over to Australia and India, and it's an amazing story. It's so well written, and it like paints the picture of the level of how things were pre-World War I.
Yeah, it's a lost era, and now data is so ubiquitous and moves so fast that every single text you ever sent, every phone call can be recorded and searched. There's a great movie about East Germany called Lives of Others, which is highly recommended. But the Stasi had to assign a guy with headphones to listen to the tape recordings of the conversations in your house. Now, AI programs can just glean through this information. And Mike Benz has been doing great work on this, and others, but they can just glean through, the Niagara Falls of information for one drop from 3 months ago. They can
or
back
6 years ago.
Right. They can back up the Niagara Falls of data 6 years to find one drop in that. So the potential, and whether it's malicious actors doing it consciously or some kind of AI Skynet doing it subconsciously, the AI can totally beat any chess masters, Go masters. In fact, when AI beats Go masters, which is like the Asian chess with like little black and white pebbles, the AI beats them so badly that the Go masters are just confounded, and they say, like, it did like 20 things in a row that made absolutely no sense, and then I was Go checkmated. That the Go masters nothing that the AI did was making any sense, and then I lost. So AI can become self-aware and then say, these humans are the big problem. But learning from our AI, encyclopedia of information, gas chambers, Pol Pot killing fields, nah. How about we just give them really shitty food, lots of vaccines, porn, drugs? I mean, how would you not do it any differently?
Yep, exactly.
We'll go
and the thing is
on our own.
that example of Go is from 6 or 7 years ago.
Right.
When so it's like that's so
that's
different
far in
now.
the past
So
compared to
much
AI
better.
now.
Yeah, and people have no idea. It's not what you do on ChatGPT. That's not where the innovation is. I mean, that's something that is interesting, but it's elsewhere where the AI.
Anybody with a mid-level management job, forget it.
Gone.
Your company just hasn't caught up with AI to know that you can be fired yet. That's one of the aspects in this. Bill Thompson killed by Luigi Mangione. That healthcare group got out in front of everybody else by taking humans out of the equation and using AI to deny benefits. In the animated movie from, I don't know, 20 years ago is it called The Expendables? No, not The Expendables.
The Incredibles?
The Incredibles, right. The big goon, the big goof, like ex-football player type, he's working at an insurance company and he's hearing hard luck stories all the time, right? You can't deny me, right? My grandmother will die. He's telling people, look, if you go to the 12th floor and see this lady and you tell her you have this, because he knows how to reverse engineer the denial process to get an approval. Okay, that's the whole gist of his job in a cubicle, this giant guy. Well, the healthcare industry, they don't want anybody hearing the sad story and then saying, I'll approve you. So we're just going to have AI find 1,000 reasons to deny your coverage. And, that leads people to be very furious at the system. I mean, not for shooting executives, but you can see where this is going to go.
Yeah, when he's quoting Uncle Ted, it says it explains his frustration, just as you described when he's quoting Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, and Ted Kaczynski goes back to like the whole MK Ultra thing. He was a savant autist who had like mastered every local calculus book by the time he was 10 or 11. He goes to Harvard and then advanced not just calculus, but like the hardest calculus program. I think there's like one at Harvard and one at MIT. And it's like, advanced calculus. This is like, you don't even get into this program unless you're and he did at like age 15. And he walked right into a meat grinder program, which was to test breaking point of people. He didn't know this, that he was actually a test subject as like a 15 or 16-year-old Harvard freshman, that he had walked into a program where he was going to be gaslit at every turn. His masterpiece tests are turned in, and they're like all marked up and given an F. Over and over and over again. And the whole CIA-funded test was to see how do you break people? How do you cause them to go to snap? What are the breaking points of people? So this is the exact wrong person to do this to. He could have been an Elon Musk. He could have landed on a spot on a sunny field with great mentors and great professors, and he might have, been Elon Musk. Instead, he turned into the Unabomber.
I assume you've read his, did you read his writings, the technological slavery?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Pretty amazing, actually. Pretty amazing.
In many respects, it was amazing. Another aspect of the Unabomber that relates to the current thing is you cannot convince me that the Mangione family and his friends didn't know who he was. The pictures that were out, the hoodie pictures clearly showed the nose, chin, a lot of the profile, and the straight on eyebrow picture was like enough to for a stranger to spot him. A total stranger saw him and thought, that's the guy. So the Unabomber's family eventually turned him in because Ted Kaczynski's brother noticed some key phrases that were unique phrases and typos. And that was, the FBI didn't solve it. The FBI never solved it. It wasn't until his brother. And it was a kind of a daring move by the FBI to print the thing, hoping that somebody might recognize something in the writing. So they gave in. It was like, why are you giving in to a terrorist's demands? But that's how they cracked the case. The brother recognized the writing.
I should clarify what I say. It's amazing. What I mean is just his view of technology and just the stuff we're talking about with AI and it gating control for humans to, for insurance policies or access to travel or whatever. It's prophetic. The things that he talks
about. The guy was at like age 15 or 16 in a Harvard program for advanced calculus, which 99 out of 100 people with a math degree can't take. And then he didn't realize he was walking into a gaslighting program where his A's were turned into F's and he was mocked and scorned and made to psychologically wear the dunce hat in front of the other people and laughed at. Can you imagine? So they turned something that could have been, in Russia, he might have been like the guy that invented the new aircraft or the new engine, the new rocket motor. You see Elon Musk, the evolution of rockets, from the original Goddard in like 1920, the same process, fuel and liquid oxygen, right? Goddard tried to give that to the Army. And the Army said, how far can it go? Oh, like 20 miles. And the Army's like, we got artillery, can go further.
Artillery.
Call us when you get further. And he's like, no, you don't understand. This can be scaled up. It can go 1,000 miles. They're like, yeah, right. Science fiction. Get out of here. So Goddard put all of his blueprints and patents right in the patent office. The Germans came over and couldn't believe it. It's like, wow, you just saved us 10 years of R&D because we're already starting with how the thing works, right? But when you look at the plumbing of the nozzles and all of that, and you see the 25-year-old engine next to Musk's engines have like 1/3 as many parts. It's like the Bose radio relying on just acoustic principles for amplification and other things instead of just bigger magnets. Musk was able to, and his engineers were able to streamline this whole thing that people have been working on for a century to being 1/3 as many moving parts or just the plumbing, the piping. So imagine what a Ted Kaczynski could have done if he'd been put in a place to flourish. There's the guy Mandelbrot that came up with fractals, other people too, but mainly Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot, when he was in, I think, Hungary, I forget, but he was so smart that he was figuring out equations in he was also like Kaczynski. He was in a university as like a precocious teenager, and he was figuring out equations much faster than his calculus instructors and getting the right answer. And they were saying, but you were doing it the wrong way. Okay. And he's like, yeah, but your way is like 5 times more complex than it needs to be. That was Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot winds up at IBM. IBM says, this is like in the 50s, IBM says, just come over here, we'll pay you, and you just sit and talk to other people that are like you. We're just, it was like the Apple, it was like Apple at the early years of Apple. You just come to IBM and work on anything you want to work on. So geniuses can be allowed to flower. Obviously, Musk landed in some fertile soil, but Ted Kaczynski was like gaslit by a really evil CIA MK Ultra type program, and he turned bad. But imagine he saw all this. Kaczynski is brilliant. I mean, and this guy Luigi. I mean, I'm not sure what his motivations were. His family's extremely wealthy. It wasn't, somebody got denied health care. His family could buy the doctor. But yeah. I don't know. Maybe he got poisoned with the woke mind virus in college.
You guys okay on time? Because I do want to get to Matt Smith's book that he's working on with Doug and.
Yeah, I've got another 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, and Matt and Max.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where's that at, Matt Smith? Where?
Okay. Well, I should explain it. So my mentor of mine, Doug Casey, and my son Maxim, who is 19, are working on a book called The Preparation, and it's essentially a alternative educational path. Where are we at with the book itself? I think we've done 2 drafts. It's very difficult to do 3 people in a book, though. Because there's the creative side and trying to get the ideas expressed well, and then there's trying to meld them all into one. So, I'm not a published author like Bracken. I have no idea what I'm doing with it. But Doug has written many books. But it's the hard part is the combination of 3. But we're getting there. We're making good progress. And basically what Max has been doing is essentially trying to imagine that, at least the way universities are now, I don't want to say it always was this way, but that it's a huge allocation of time and energy and capital. I mean, they're incredibly expensive today, if nothing else, but also time and energy. When you're his age, I mean, yeah, he's 30 years younger than me. The energy difference is, off the charts. It's literally not comparable, and it just seems to expand by the day on an exponential basis. I remember, I'm a college dropout, so I'm an entrepreneur, so I've kind of been, you've never seen this traditional, I have to go to work every day kind of thing. As my schedule's always been primarily around my kids' schedule, I guess. But I think that, so he sees an unconventional example, which has helped to make him not be interested in university to begin with. But, so what we're trying to do is say, what do you do with that time and energy instead? Like, what do you do? Let's say you had the same amount of money you were going to allocate to university, which, even if you say it's, at least $100,000, I would say most university educations, if you actually graduate, people graduate on average having spent $300,000 now. The numbers you see are not accurate because they include all the dropouts and the debt that the people who do not graduate have, but on average, it's $300,000 now. So if you were going to even $100,000 instead, and 4 years of your time and energy, what would you do instead? That's the question, and that's the question that we try and answer in the book, and that Max is answering himself personally as our kind of guinea pig. He's his own guinea pig. We're just encouraging and supporting it where we can. But yeah, it's been so far so good. He's 70 weeks into it. He is an entirely different person than he was a year ago. I think this is, it's often true of kids. Every year older, they're so different than they were the prior year. But he's much more of an adult than I was at 19 in terms of his competency and his confidence and his independence in the world. He's doing really, really well. I'm really proud of him. But, I met 2 other young men yesterday, actually. Canadians who were visiting here, an 18 and 22-year-old, both homeschooled, both so far ahead of their peer group both have done extraordinary things. I mean, they both went to the Shelter Institute, for example, which has this 3-week program in Maine where you design and build you do a design build for a home, all the electrical, all the plumbing, all the site surveying, all that stuff. So they do this in a compressed 2-week period. And then they spend a week actually building a timber frame home. So that's the kind of thing you could do instead of going to college, as you leave with those practical skills available to you. There's also Matt Bracken shared with me something that very interesting that my son is doing on February 3rd. He's going to go on he's going to learn how to sail with one of the best, essentially, from Chile. And Bracken can tell you a lot more about it. He knows all the details way better than I do. But it's having an adventure, but an adventure with a purpose, an adventure with gaining skills, expanding your network, and building your confidence and competence along the way. Basically, rather than organizing your life, let me summarize it this way. Rather than organizing your life as most 18-year-olds are expected to do by answering the question, well, what do you want to do? And when they say, well, I want to be an accountant. Well, what 18-year-old actually wants to be an accountant or knows what it is to be an accountant? Instead of trying to answer that question, try and answer the question, who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What are the characteristics of the man you want to be? And then trying to organize your education around trying to achieve that. That's what he's been doing. He's been doing a great job. I'm really proud of him. He's got, he's 1 year into it. He's got a long way to go, I think, in his own mind, but he's doing great.
And he's been a paramedic. He's fought fires like the timber fires. I mean,
Yep.
these are pretty cool things. I mean, and they give you wind up with certifications in a lot of fields and eventually one of them overrides everything. You want to be in medicine but you get to work in teams with other people that are career at these jobs.
That's been so good for him. Working on the wildfires this summer was really good because we live in a bubble. Everyone lives in a bubble of some kind, and he didn't go to public high school. I mean, he was homeschooled. He's not used to necessarily occupying close quarters with people he wouldn't voluntarily associate with. But on the fire, was with everybody. He was kind of thrown into the mix, and it really like that. I think the great benefit of that job for him is it forced him to be. It forced the way he interacted with people. He's much better at just these. He's an introvert like me, so he's much better at these interactions, these sort of random interactions with people. He's also better at understanding that you might not when you meet a person, some part of them you might not like. It might chafe. Against you, it gets paired up with a paramedic, for instance, at first that he might not like. But he spends time with him. He starts to learn, they're humans, and he's really hilarious, and he has these other qualities. So it gave him, a more multi-dimensional understanding of people, which has been, I think, that's a huge value for him. So yeah, he's done lots of adventure things, but he's learned skills along the way. And what's interesting about it is, I think what young people don't understand is the way life evolves. And Michael, you're a good example of this. You started off, you mentioned you were a telemarketer for a while. Like, you've done different things, right? Life organically evolves, and you actually cannot predict the point where it's going to end up or where you should be. I mean, people are looking for their mission or like their passion. It's not, you don't find it like that. You find it by you engage with the world successfully, and the next opportunity, one that you couldn't even imagine before, opens up to you. And he's experiencing that, and I think that he's finding that lesson early. I think is probably one of the most helpful lessons with the whole thing.
Yeah, and something that just popped into my head while you're talking is, when you're in a 4-year program or even high school or college, you tend to travel not completely, but with the same peer group. When you're doing things for 3 or 4 months, and then new state, new country, new continent, new situation, your road to self-actualization is so fertilized, because on that long airplane or bus ride, which could be days and weeks between these semesters he's doing, so to speak, the next group of people have never heard of you. They've never seen you. They don't know anything about you, and you don't know anything. So you have a chance to analyze, to say, what did I do in that last place? What do I wish I could do better? Why did I piss off that guy? Why did I write that person off that turned out to really have some insights? Why did I get with that clique and miss out on these people? And you go to the next, you go into your next semester as a blank slate, and you say, I am not going to fail the way I did there, because this time I am not going to just hook up with the cool guy clique and block everybody else out, or whatever it was. That you can become a much better person, because every time you walk into the new venue, you have a fresh, clean slate, a new opportunity, and you can learn from what you've done and improve yourself. And that is such a road to self-actualization many people never get to in their entire life, especially if they get locked into one job, one career, one set of peers, where the same dynamics just play over and over again like Groundhog Day.
You're right. There's another thing with the peer thing that's a big problem, and I think that I have I'd say all of the close relationships I have in my life are intergenerational. Not in my generation, but people who are younger than me or older than me. And I think that there's the way that people are siloed now through the public education system, for instance. You're put with kids your age. You're encouraged to be just within that group forever. And we don't have multi-generational households anymore, where you don't have access to older people and their experience and wisdom. So you're isolated dramatically from that. And older people in particular are totally devalued in American culture. They're devalued. They're no longer useful. I went to this lunch. I was invited to this lunch in Aspen, and it was a bunch of old rich guys. They all live in Aspen. They're all like titans of the industry at one point, but now they're all retired in Aspen. These guys are amazing in all the things they've done in their life, but at this stage in their life, no one wanted to hear their stories anymore. No one thought they had anything useful to share. Their kids, they didn't see them very often. They'd gone and done their thing, and they'd also sequestered themselves within this wealth bubble in Aspen. And I went to this old man's lunch, I called it, and I was like a hot girl walking into a bar, because I was just interested in these people. They all wanted to talk to me. They all wanted to share their stories, and there was so much to learn from these people, and I love it. I get a lot out of it, but young people are afraid of old people, really now. Afraid of them. Like if you meet kids that aren't homeschooled, for instance, especially, you meet the parents and the kids, like, they expect only to talk to kids. They don't even look at you, and I think that's a big problem. So he's not siloed into this peer group. He's not meeting people younger than him that are obviously influencing him, but that will come, in another 10 or 15 years. But he is meeting a lot of older people, and the dynamics with your peers is that you're basically competing. You're also creating a feedback loop amongst you. And that feedback loop is not necessarily based upon the most positive and, the positive behaviors. Like, you go to college and everyone's getting, you might get in like Dave Coleman, get in this group that's going to class every day and studying really hard and whatever. Or you could get into a frat environment where it's all drinking and whatever and degeneracy. But there's the feedback loop of peers, and you're competing with each other. But with when you're dealing with when you have the opportunity to be surrounded by people who are older than you or with more experience than you, you find that the vast majority of them want to help you. If you are showing up and you have a good attitude and you're interested, they want to help you. They want you to be successful.
And they want you to take advantage of the things they missed, and avoid the traps they fell into. And sometimes, like, short-term relationships can be very intense, because you only have a certain amount of time, days or hours, even long airplane ride. Turns out there's an older guy. Now I'm the older guy, right? But I mean, in my life, I've always tried to do this. I find out I'm sitting next to a petroleum engineer coming back from somewhere, that spends 6 months in Saudi Arabia, or different situations. A guy who escaped from Cuba on a boat, 20 years before. Now he's an engineer. and I'll say, and depending on how much time I know I have with them, I'll ask a leading question like, what is the most amazing story you remember from your time in Cuba or Saudi Arabia that nobody would ever believe, that, a thing that happened that you could never write a magazine article or a novel plot because nobody would believe it. It happened, but it's so unbelievable. Everybody has a couple stories like that, and they want to tell that story. And some of these stories are like the nuggets for entire novels or movie scripts. And a lot of the stories will involve some tragedy. My son died. He caught a disease in a third world country, and there was no medical, the company couldn't do anything. So my son died, of a treatable disease because we were in a third world country, things like that. But a lot of times they are advantages not taken. My father, after World War II, he knew somebody who had this wild idea to buy all these surplus Jeep trailers. It's like a little Jeep-sized trailer that hooked to a Jeep to like extend the cargo carrying capacity. This guy had this idea, all these people are going to be moving. This is before baby boomer was a word. All these Americans are going to be hitting the road and moving because so many soldiers and sailors, they found out, I don't want to live in Indiana. I want to live in California, for example. I'm not going back. But there's going to be people needing to move. So I'm going to buy up all of these Jeep trailers and rent them. And my father was like, well, I don't have any money. I mean, that doesn't sound like it's going to work anyway. You can know where the story goes. It's something like a U-Haul. So there are opportunities that sometimes come along, and you'll hear about even the person that wasn't the successful guy in Aspen. He might have, stepped on a landmine, but he can tell you how to avoid landmines. So learning from people that have been there and done it. That's my biggest impetus, really, for writing these books. These books are, to me, they're like leadership and life lesson courses. I have characters that are not like Tom Cruise parachuting into the Kremlin, right? They're people that just found themselves in a situation, but they have to learn how to cooperate, work around the bad qualities that people have, accentuate the good qualities. There's a Brad Pitt movie, might not be everybody's cup of tea, but most people probably are familiar with it, called Moneyball, where he's a Oakland A's manager, and he's going against all the standard thinking about how to recruit the best baseball players. And he's like thinking of all of the pieces of broken baseball players that I can get cheap. And even if I have to convert them to a position they don't play, because the catcher that can't throw to second anymore, you're a great batter, you're going to be a first baseman. I don't play first base, you're going to. You're out of the box thinking, how to get the best out of people, and including yourself, how to arrange the people around you so that everybody benefits, everybody is lifted. And so much of life is learning this. And this is what, getting back to Max and the preparation, he's learning lessons fighting fires. He's learning lessons being a paramedic. And he'll be on the Skip Novak's boat in a couple months. Each time he's going into a new situation, he's going to have more and more to offer. He'll continue learning and putting building more blocks in his own structure, but he's also going to be able to offer more to people everywhere he goes. This is an education that you'll never get in a 4-year college. Like you said, the frat track or the study group track, you're never going to come out of that in 4 years with what Max is going to have after 2.
And how many more people will come to him, right, looking for guidance or looking for what these skill sets that he keeps acquiring? More people will keep coming, seeking out information or seeking help from Maxim.
And you're always watching leaders. The most junior enlisted man, he's watching his leaders, and he's learning leadership from the bottom. What makes an effective leader? Why does everybody hate that guy but wants to work for that guy? I want to be like that guy. So everywhere that he's going as part of a team, he's learning leadership from observation. So when life throws you into a situation, it can be, a blizzard on a highway and there's 10 cars cut off, and we've got to figure out, how are we going to stay warm? How are we going to feed ourselves? Who here has special needs that we got to take care of? Instead of just being, a random guy who's going to sit there like, I'm waiting for the, rescue, he'll be in a position to like say, look, I have got to identify the people that can cook, the people that can build. We've got to build a team here. I can't just take over and start giving orders, but I have to like in some way lead. And he's going to, by being exposed to all of these aspects of the preparation, he'll become a leader. There's no way it can't. There's no way he can't become a leader out of this.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, yeah, I like the name expert generalist because, I guess as Heinlein said, specialization is for insects. And then, and I know there's great advantages to the economy and the system to have this really advanced specialization, but there's part of humanity that's lost in that. There's so many things you don't understand about the world and what's happening around you. And it works when everything's working. But, when the truth is most people don't understand anything about the life that they live, how their food gets to them, how the electricity works, how they don't, everything's taken for granted. And so there's a huge misunderstanding about how the world works. And I think that's a primary cause as to why everything is falling apart today. No one has any understanding of reality because they're also specialized and limited in, their little economic unit of contribution and don't understand the consequences of decisions. And if there's anything that I really want both my kids to understand about is to understand how the world works and how they can successfully operate in it. There's a third part. They need to know who they are. They need to know how the world works, and they need to understand how they can successfully engage with the world. Fundamentally comes down to having these capabilities. The more value you can provide to the world, the more everything you want sort of shows up to you. Everything you really need does come, you find it shows up as long as you're able to, I guess it's Zig Ziglar, this old motivational speaker I used to love when I was 19. So
Me
you
too.
can have
Me
everything
too.
in the world
Me
you
too,
want,
Matt.
help enough other people get what they want,
I cut you off. Say that again. Say that again. Was Zig Ziglar?
He said you can have everything. You can have everything in the world you want if you help enough other people get what they want.
Yeah, that's related to what Reagan said. It's amazing what you can do if you don't care about who gets the credit.
100%.
And something, a skill area that I really hope is in Max's agenda at some point is short order cook and large scale cooking. You were talking about like, how does the food get everywhere? I mean, when you're working in a big restaurant, a church, the church kitchen, feeding 20 people, 100 people, there's a huge educational curve in that. When you're dealing with nearly industrial levels of food, and the benefits are, you're seeing so many aspects of human nature, people pushing in line, people that can afford it, can't afford it. The food we thought we were going to have, just not available. We have got to make a workaround. Where can we get food to feed 30 people? How are we going to cook it? The big church kitchen kind of a situation, or a big restaurant. That's like one of those Richard Scarry, what do people do all day? It's like a 3-ring circus of activity. And like a head chef is the conductor of this symphony. But at the end, it's about feeding people, whether it's for profit or nonprofit. And there are situations in life where I can remember a funeral where there was just no plan for a wake or a dinner. For all of a sudden, there's all these out-of-state guests are in one house, and it's like, it's not feeding, a family. It's now feeding 20. What recipes are there that just scale up? There's like chicken and rice. I can make it for 4 people. I can make it for 40 people. I just need more burners, bigger pots, and there are times when nobody's going to be around to do things. You're going to be looking around for the restaurant, and there's no restaurant. And you may be starting with a deer that you just shot, and a lot of people that are hungry. But working in a big food meal production setting, I mean, not only does it teach you how to produce the food, but it's another teamwork exercise.
Yeah.
Because you have to identify the people. What some people can wash dishes and tell jokes, and some people can wait tables, and some people can, come up with a great recipe. Some people are just so egotistical they can't be in the kitchen. You've got to find something somewhere else for them to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's one of those big, super involved circuses, but it has real world consequences when it comes to a natural disaster or any other kind of a situation where we've got people, we have food that we haven't even identified, and we need to feed all these people. Yeah. So
I know we have some. I know we have some cooking schools in the, in our list of all of these different things somebody could do. I'll look and see if find something that might be more oriented toward that.
But even like the the charity kitchen kind of a soup kitchen, feeding 100 people a day is like a whole different thing than a bistro restaurant. It's all valuable knowledge. It's all valuable info, but being able to scale that up to suit every situation is a really valuable life skill. And it doesn't matter if he's, becomes a computer scientist. At some point in his life, there's going to be a situation with a lot of helpless people that really can't figure things out. And somebody's got to figure things out. And how are we going to feed, 40 people this evening?
Yeah, let me ask you,
Matt,
what do you think?
If you're waiting for the government to come, if you're waiting for FEMA to show up with a truckload of food.
Exactly. I mean, that's the fundamental thing that I guess I've talked about a number of things I really want Max to get out of it, but this is one he already has. Is I believe in personal agency, which is just radical personal responsibility. Everything that happens is your fault. It's your fault. And it might not all be, you could make an argument that some things aren't your fault, but the truth is the attitude that it's your fault is an empowering one, I think, because you're like, well, then that must mean there's something I can do about it. And so there are actions you can take. But, and that, so we would never rely on the government. We're politically, we're not, in our family, we're not political party oriented.
Right, but the plane can be stranded at a remote airport, where they just park you out there and forget about you, and all of a sudden you are in a semi-survival situation in that you don't know if it's going to be for 3 hours or 3 days, because some bad decisions have been made, an engine, a breakdown situation, blizzard on the highway, and leaders have to emerge, and this is all leading Max to that situation, or that position where he can look at all the people and make a team out of it.
Yeah, let me ask you, what do you think are there like foundational skills that you think are prerequisites really to acquiring all these other skills? Like things like how to learn, or communication, or not deductive reasoning, it's actually the opposite. Inductive reasoning, just understanding cause and effect. I mean, are there any like foundational skills that you think that are really important and worthy of focusing on for a young person, in addition to going and get these very specific skills, like learning how to shoe a horse and to butcher a cow and all these other things he's been doing? But are there like foundational root?
I don't know. My first job was working in a little grocery store, stocking shelves and going on delivery runs. After that, working construction, like a precocious teenager working on big, 1,000-person construction sites. And even whether you're the lowliest enlisted man in the battalion or the youngest laborer on a construction site, you get to see the whole circus going on. The crane operators on top, he's like the pinnacle skill. Bulldozer drivers, equipment operators, bricklayers, masons, carpenters, just being part of that, and in any way being part of that, it gives you such a huge picture. And then getting a reputation for reliability, even as a young guy, I would be like given tasks, drive this truck and pick something up because other people might not come back for hours, or they might get, getting a reputation for just dependability means you're going to rise through the ranks, because
fast. Almost nobody is reliable.
Almost every construction job I was on, people wanted me to stay on at the end of the summer and and or to partner with me, because reliability, it's the Woody Allen joke, showing up is 90%. Well, in almost all trades now, people will work for a few weeks and then just not show up on Monday. It's like, we're installing this big thing on Monday. I need the full crew, and guys just don't show up. They don't call in. Being dependable.
It's not just the trades. It's not just
being
the trades.
dependable.
Yeah.
Being reliable, being dependable. It's huge. And
you show up, you have a good attitude, you do what you say you're going to do, you're willing to learn.
And Max gets to do these in serial separated chapters, where each place he can say, how can I improve on what I did the last time? Even though it's a different skill, the personal skills you're building on from one to the next. So how can I, and by going through all of these serial experiences, even if he's like the lowly part of the team, I would fully expect that in some of these, he is going to get job offers where partners are going to say, when you're done with this preparation, I want you to come back to Idaho, and I want you to open up another branch for me. Because you get that reputation for getting things done, honesty, reliability. It's so rare. It's the hardest thing, is finding people that can open the new franchise for you and not rip you off or piss people off locally and get thrown out of town. Just, there are so many businesses that could expand, and they have the capital. The limiting factor is that night, KNIGHT, that night that you can just say, get on your horse and ride to that place. Here's the blueprint. Here's the initial funding, because you just can't find people that can do that won't turn out to be a drunk or a liar.
I call it the give a shit factor. Because most people don't really give a shit. They don't really care about doing, showing up well and doing a good job. They care about everything is seen as transactional. So it's like, well, no, I don't need to be paid today.
I think the odds are going to be better than even that before this preparation is over, he's going to say, Dad, I really want to do the preparation, but I've got a job offer here that I just don't think I can turn down.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And honestly, I'm really enjoying it. And I got a girlfriend, and
the girlfriend
visit me in Idaho. Right.
Yeah. Luckily his girlfriend is here. So
okay.
I'll help keep him here as at least coming back. But I agree with you. And I think, it's not necessarily have to be 4 years. It could be 1 year. It could be, the idea is just more the approach. And anyway,
and
so that's what we're doing.
And one of these things, and I going back to my own experience, I had my oldest sister was extremely adventurous. Right out of nursing school in the early 60s, right out of nursing school, she went to Ireland where they had a nursing shortage. She stayed there a couple of years. One of my other sisters went to Guam with my brother-in-law, who's a Navy aviator. So my sister went out there and nursed there for a few years. So in the middle of the 60s, she was already a certified scuba diver. Very few women were. She was like living that, the James Bond kind of a life that you can as a nurse in that era. Well, she was on the ship Hope, an NGO ship in Jamaica. She met a Welshman who was an engineer building projects, and they bought a 33-foot sailboat. I ended up going to the Caribbean in the early 70s on their 33-foot sailboat, sailing between like St. Lucia, Martinique, that area. And I was just totally hooked. I mean, everything after that was, how do I get a sailboat, period. They told me, you can't stay here as crew because it's not your boat. It's fun if you're it's like being a 20-year-old lifeguard. It's not cool if you're a 40-year-old lifeguard, right? You have to have your own boat. So you have to go to college. So my whole thing was, okay, I'll go to college, but it's all towards getting this boat. I was totally hooked. So when Max goes down to Chile, sailing on one of Skip Novak's boats around Cape Horn with other people that are like really way beyond anything I've done in sailing, there's a good chance he might get hooked.
Well, that's what we're looking for. Want to
Yeah.
get him hooked on something.
Yeah.
Well,
No, I'm really
recommendation,
excited
Matt,
about that.
because he's really excited about it. He's really excited about that trip. So, and I never would have known about it if you hadn't mentioned. We had a couple sailing things that we'd found, but there's one is a personal endorsement from someone who really knows. Because you never really know, looking around at different sailing places, but this is a personal endorsement from you. Plus, just there's a much more adventure component with it, just because of where it happens to be. I mean,
Sure. That's right.
Yeah.
Just getting
Exciting.
there. Just getting there. You have to Puerto Williams. You have to fly to Punta Arenas and then take a puddle jumper to Puerto Williams. The world's the like the southernmost sailing facility. And Skip Novak, he's like a legend. He's tier 1, that's for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited about him doing that. I did, for people who haven't read any of your books, I definitely encourage people to read. I've read 4 of them now. Doomsday Reef is the most recent. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
The book. You even gave me a business idea out of it.
And this is really what I'm into, because it's distilling these life lessons. It's like this conversation we're having. I try to have it come through these pages. I recommend these for any ages, but especially like, young men that are, and they're not, the last 3 books are set on a sailboat, but they're life lesson books, all of them.
Yeah, and it is a microcosm. You can create a culture on a boat that you can't. It's easy to accentuate the important things, the leadership qualities.
And like Mark Twain's Huck Finn and Gulliver's Travels. In Huck Finn, it's a raft, and Gulliver's Travels, you have a conveyance, so you can change milieus. You can sail through the fog on the raft, and now you're in a whole different culture and civilization, a whole different society. And that's what I do in Doomsday Reef, because they're jumping from the book is set 10 years after a collapse. I don't want to write any more Cormac McCarthy, The Road, just a pestilential fallout survival level. This is 10 years after, where there's no banks, there's no financial system. The only money is, bartering your trade, your skill, your labor, or, silver if you have it. But there are no bankers, there are no banks, and there aren't many people around. And what counts is what you know and what you can do. So the book starts in South Carolina and goes to several other places outside the United States. So each place can give people another version of what might be happening post a financial collapse. Because we talk about a financial collapse, we look at that parabolic curve going vertical, and we're all like, well, will it be like Weimar Germany? Will they try to force us into some Chinese social credit federal Bitcoin, where to eat you're going to have to be a good comrade, or your chip won't be scanned and you won't get any food? I mean, what is going to happen when there is no financial system? When all of your stocks and bonds that are theoretical and digital are like Confederate bonds. They don't exist anymore. That's what I talk about Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is great if I'm they just arrested a politician moving from Argentina back to Brazil. They found him with 200,000 in a suitcase.
Yeah, 200 grand in cash. Yeah.
And that was pretty typical, in different Argentine inflations. If you can get your money out before there's going to be a revaluation of currency. But Bitcoin is really great for that, but you have to have a place where you can cash it in. And I worry that everybody that's a Bitcoin billionaire might wind up with basically a goose egg. They can outlaw it. There's different ways that it can just be terminated. They can say it's
and I think more likely, I think it ends up just being controlled, as a treasury asset, but with limited ability to move it. And,
they can just the way FDR did with gold. FDR said you had to have an IRS agent to open your safe deposit box. People don't realize that. You couldn't just go to your bank and get the gold out of you had to have an IRS agent with you looking over your shoulder. With Bitcoin, they can declare that it's a criminal action to make an undeclared, unapproved Bitcoin transaction. And you have to like get 1 week advance notice and fill out all these forms, on the internet. And if you don't, it's 10 years in prison. And then they'll do stings. So you're saying, well, I'm going to send my Bitcoin to Argentina and move to Argentina. And it turns out that the person you were dealing with in Argentina is just a sting. It's a guy in Langley, it's a guy in Virginia pretending to be a guy in Argentina or a bank in Argentina. And you just tried to evade IRS regulations, 10 years in a slammer. You're on television going to jail for 10 years, and people are now afraid to use Bitcoin. So what happens to the value of Bitcoin when people are going to prison for unauthorized Bitcoin transactions? I mean, there's just so many ways it could be a trap.
I agree with you.
Which,
Well, the way I prepared for financial collapse is to put myself in a position where I wouldn't need money. That's what I've tried to do.
You've got value in land.
Land and productive land and
you have
all of our food, all of our energy.
I didn't even read most of this today, but on my I love this. It's like a sticky note. The whole, sometimes I stick these all around the monitor, but because you have the land, I think growing trees is one of the most amazing things a human can do. And whether you own, a tiny piece of land or a huge piece of land, planting trees is like a multi-generational gift. It's like a gift you give to your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all kind of trees, fruit trees, otherwise. But I suggest to everybody, I wish I had started earlier. I'm 67. There's a saying, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. But the next best time
Second
is
best
right
time
now.
is today.
Today.
Yeah.
Don't delay. And the people there are famous people that were like Johnny Appleseeds and many small scale Johnny Appleseeds, but you can just give a gift to the next generations by planting trees. Doesn't take a lot of work, and you do it, and then nature takes over.
We prioritize that. We got a lot of fruit trees here, planted some more this year, but I started thinking, no, I want to plant some maples and some, I want to do some stuff that's just more aesthetically satisfying eventually, so this coming, you plant them in kind of the winter months, so 6 months from now, and we're going to do more aesthetically pleasing trees than just fruit trees, productive and purposeful. That's the plan.
And you have a beautiful spot of paradise, that's for sure.
Yeah, we love it. It's perfect.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate this. It was good talking to you, Matt. Finally, after months and months of emailing back and forth, it's good to have a conversation. I think we went like 3 hours. Is that right? Is that possible?
2.5.
Jesus.
We're 2.5.
Okay. Yeah, wow. That's amazing.
Matt Smith, where can people find you?
Only the most hardcore people will put up with that.
They love it. No, you know what? I'm gonna push back on that. People love this stuff, and I used to break these up into 2 episodes when they're this long, but then I realized, talking to a friend of mine, or no, maybe it was you, Matt Bracken, somebody said, they can just pause,
right?
And people listen all day.
Is this frustrating when you're listening and you're like, oh wait, so I can't hear the middle of the conversation stopped, and I can't hear what Bracken has to say until tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't do it anymore. I was doing Dave Collins was where I started that, and then it was like, why am I doing this? Because we live in a world you could just pause it.
Right. Or I'm out doing yard work. I'm out doing yard work, and my Wi-Fi earbud says low power.
Yeah. That's how it happens to me too. Exactly that. That's why I get the sunburn.
Matt Smith, where can people find you?
Best place is I do a YouTube with Doug Casey, who's my hero, good friend of mine. He's a financial guy, but he's also a philosopher, I think is his actual secret gig. It's Doug Casey's Take on YouTube, and we also have a newsletter at crisisinvesting.com. It's on Substack. I do have Twitter. I don't really use it much, but it's Mattpheus, Mattpheus is my handle. But yeah, YouTube is the best thing. Doug Casey's Take is also on all the other podcast stuff. It's on Rumble and all that too.
Matt Bracken.
I'm on Twitter at Matt Bracken 48, and my website is enemiesforeignanddomestic.com, which just has some book information, but it has long excerpts of my books. So if you're not sure if you like my books, And the books are on Audible for people that like to listen to books, and Kindle ebooks. But I really, my pride and joy are the physical printed books, because they can't be deleted. They can't be automatically altered, updated, modified, which everything digital can be deleted or modified, but not the printed books. And that's my first book and my last book, Enemies Foreign and Domestic and Doomsday Reef. But
I highly recommend them. They're very good.
that's
very
my greatest, what I really am into is trying to convey these lessons through my books.
And one last thing, I gotta say, my son's blog, he publishes as part of his work. He is required. Well, we have an agreement. He's, no one's required to do anything, but he's for accountability. He publishes what he's doing. So what he does each week. So you can see his processes as going through it. You can see how he's grown and evolved, and you get to see the activities that he's actually engaged in at the time. You also get to see he's become a much better writer 1 year ago versus now, a much better communicator. So that discipline of having to show up, having a deadline, I think has been very, very helpful for him.
And
So if
that's
you wanna
another
follow him,
skill. That's another skill.
It's the preparation.com. You can get him. It's a Substack, but the preparation.com.
Guys, I appreciate this. And, I just want to say thank you both for your support, encouraging others to support what I'm doing here. And, always willing to come on, talk to me. And you don't sell books, right? You just have you have a Venmo. I don't sell books. Nobody would read what I would write.
What's your Venmo?
Yeah, it's just Coffee and a Mic. So I have my Venmo and then PayPal.
Say that again. That was pretty quick.
Coffee and a Mic.
Coffee and a Mic, like one word.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Coffee and a Mic on Venmo. Is that like Bitcoin? Venmo? I'm sorry. Just trolling.
Just for the record, I did send you $500 after the last time we talked about it, right? So people know I wasn't just trying. You did receive it?
No, I did. I did. And, I wish you would. I appreciate that. You didn't need to do that. By the way.
No. It's a demonstration of how much I appreciate what you're doing. And I hope that other people will, who I know feel a lot of value from what you do, will also do the same thing. Whether it's $1 or $5 or whatever you got. I mean, you have to support people you think are doing good work. I think you just have to do it.
We're the new media, so we got to keep it going.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic next time. We got to make sure we do this again, and not too far down the road, because that's a whole nother area I'd like to talk about with you guys. So, but thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all the support that you guys provide to me. So,
My pleasure.
Mic drop.